Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Hero System. Obtain teleportation ability at the beginning. Chapter 21. Leo used his thoughts to control the remaining silver-gray metal in his hand, and it rose in front of him. Immediately under the action of his thoughts, the metal was pressed into a disc with a diameter of 10 centimeters, and then Leo used his thoughts to control the metal he made. The magic carving knife carved magic symbols on it. Half an hour later, Leo looked at the metal disc in his hand and showed a big smile. While lamenting that the power of mind is easier to use than hands, with a hint of eagerness, he put the disc in a nice container, a black metal ball the size of a football. As the black ball divided into two hemispheres and swallowed the metal disc, golden stripes appeared on the black metal ball, emitting a faint golden light, and then mysterious energy fluctuations appeared here, in the laboratory. Seeing this, Leo's eyes flashed with fire. He picked up the sharp magic knife and scratched it in the palm of his hand. Suddenly, a scar across half of the palm appeared on Leo's hand, and blood gushed out continuously. Although his hands were dripping with blood, Leo did not panic at all, and was extremely calm. Then, something miraculous happened. The scars on Leo's palm slowly stopped the blood. In the end, it took only a few minutes. The scars on his hands disappeared, not even a single scar was left. Success. Looking at the metal ball under his feet, Leo roared happily. In the past, Heimerdinger called you a technological magic maintenance robot, but now you are called a nurse. Leo patted the top of the black ball with a smirk, and then the black metal ball, the golden stripes covered on the ball unexpectedly condensed towards the front of the ball, and then a pair of big golden eyes appeared, and a golden mouth occupying half the size of the ball appeared. The metal ball, oh, no, it's a nurse. After hearing Leo's words, the nurse made a voice with a special metallic texture, yes, master. Then 5 black holes appeared on the nurse's body, and 5 metal limbs with black balls hanging from the top protruded from them. 3 of these metal limbs formed an equilateral triangle below and became the nurse's legs. One right became the arm of the nurse, and then the nurse stood up with the support of those 3 thin legs, and used her ball-shaped feet to roll behind Leo. Let's go. With a hint of excitement, Leo disappeared from the laboratory with the nurse, and teleported back to his home. As soon as he appeared, Leo hugged the nurse and turned to Emma with a look of excitement. The room rushed. Boom. The cheerful Leo just pushed open the door. Seeing the scene in front of him, his brain exploded, and then 2 meandering bloodstains flowed down from Leo's nostrils. At this time, Emma's body was bare, as if she had just taken a bath, and she was wiping her hair with a bath towel. On her hair that hadn't dried yet, drops of crystal water were flowing along Emma's beautiful body. The collarbone dripped down, and then slowly slid down along the beautiful curve. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Emma was stunned, and turned her head to look, only to see Leo staring at her blankly. Then Emma screamed, blushing, and instantly turned into a beautiful statue. The Diamond Man said to Leo angrily, "Get out." Hearing this, Leo woke up instantly, and closed Emma's door with a face full of panic. "It's beautiful," Leo murmured outside the door. At this moment, the nurse opened her eyes and said with her unique metallic voice, "Master, you are injured, treat him now." Then a mysterious wave enveloped Leo. "You were injured," Leo said embarrassingly after patting the nurse. After a while, Emma opened the door with a red face and came out, looking at Leo with an embarrassed expression. She said angrily, "Why didn't you knock?" "Well, I want to show you something." Leo raised the nurse on his hand, but at this time the nurse was in the shape of a black ball, so Emma frowned when she saw this. "What do you want?" "Is this an ugly ball I'm watching?" "Ahem, Emma, it's called a nurse, and it's the result of my research over the past few days," Leo said, patting the nurse's head. After receiving Leo's signal, golden stripes lit up on the nurse's black sphere, and Leo put it on the ground, showing its own active form. So cute. Looking at the chubby nurse with a cute face, Emma was surprised, and she was about to reach out to hug the nurse, but she didn't want the nurse to give Emma face, and avoided Emma with her chubby feet. "Ma. What is this? A robot toy?" Looking at the nurse standing behind Leo, Emma asked curiously. "He is a little guy with magical power created by magic technology," Leo explained lightly. "Magic power? Do you mean it turns into a ball?" Seeing Emma's teasing expression, Leo's face was full of black lines. He knew that Emma was angry because the nurse avoided her hug. Thinking of this, Leo turned around and grabbed the nurse, with a look of flattery. The expression was handed to Emma. Catching the nurse Leo handed over, Emma held up the nurse's bulging body. Emma smiled, ignoring the struggling nurse with her calves, and said, "What magical power." Hearing this, Leo grabbed Emma's hand, condensed his thoughts into a knife, and cut off Emma's hand. Seeing this, Emma subconsciously wanted to withdraw her hand from Leo, but seeing Leo's serious appearance, she finally gave up this behavior and chose to trust Leo. The neonly blade slashed across Emma's fingertips, and did not make a big cut to himself like Leo did in the laboratory before, but left a small wound only centimeters long. This is. Emma looked at Leo with doubts on her face, waiting for Leo's answer, but at this moment, the nurse who had been struggling suddenly calmed down, and then a metallic voice came from the nurse. "Come out. Someone is hurt. Get treatment." Then there was a mysterious wave of life on the nurse's body. Emma looked at the nurse in her arms with a look of surprise. At this moment, Emma felt that her fingertips, which were still losing blood, were slowly healing. At that time, it had already recovered. "This little thing can heal," Emma said in shock, looking at Leo who was smiling slightly. "Haha, of course. Do you know what this means?" Leo laughed. Hearing this, a bright light flashed in Emma's eyes. Thinking of the management knowledge she had learned, she showed a look of money lovers, and said, "This means we are going to get rich. Do you know that the prototype of the little nurse is the skill of the great inventor? I'm going to borrow some money. I won't eat tonight." Seeing Emma rushing out the door with a money lover's look on his face, Leo smiled wryly, and mourned for those who were about to be borrowed by Emma one time. Just now, Emma had told him the initial plan, that is, she would first go to the Wall Street tycoons to borrow some money, and then she would use the money to start her own company. Finally, relying on the magical nurse, she will make a business empire. Although with Emma's mutant power, she can get a lot of money without any effort at all, but after hearing this, Emma said, "It doesn't make any sense at all. What I want is not money, but an achievement after hard work. Besides, if I want to do that, my management knowledge will be in vain. I really don't understand." "Woman," Leo sighed, lying on the bed, and then fell asleep due to the sleepiness accumulated from the long-term experiment. At this moment, Director Hall ushered in the real owner, Howard Stark, in the place where Leo created the nurse before. "Mr. Stark, I don't know why you came this time." Hall bent slightly, and asked his boss with a hint of flattery. "Hall, your figure is still so plump." Howard, who had a nice mustache, a little gray hair, and a face full of bohemian, teased. "Really, thank you for your compliment." Hall touched his somewhat bald head. "I need some materials for experiments, come here and get them." Howard walked towards the warehouse as soon as he finished his sentence. Seeing this, Hall hurriedly followed Howard. "Sir, what materials do you need? I'll get them for you." Director Hall couldn't help but panic when he thought that Leo's experiments had consumed a lot of rare materials. Hearing Hall's words, Howard paused slightly, because according to Hall's personality, he would never stop what Howard was going to do, but today's behavior is a bit abnormal. Thinking of this, Howard's beard shook slightly, and he said with a smile, "Hall, you are really getting more and more caring. It is right to serve you." Hall's voice was slightly nervous, because Howard had already stood at the door of the warehouse where the rare materials were stored, and entered the password to open the door. After entering the password that only he and Hall knew, Howard entered the warehouse full of rare materials, and after a slight glance, he found something abnormal, because many of the rare materials were missing a lot, even this time the palladium needed as much less. "You must know that the materials here are all his private inventory, and they are only for him." Thinking of this, Howard's heart moved slightly, and he said, "Oh, yes. Hall, remembering that I still have some things to deal with, you will send them to my laboratory at home according to the usual share of the materials I need." "Good sir." Hearing this, Hall let out a long sigh of relief. "Then I want to go." Howard patted Hall on the shoulder. He had a panoramic view of Hall's movements. He wanted to see who dared to impress his things, and even made him Stark. "Director, cover for him." At this time, Leo, who didn't know all this, was still asleep. Maybe it was because he was really tired. Leo didn't wake up until the sky was getting dark. Sleeping for so long, looking at the sky outside, Leo pushed open the door and found that the old Paul and his wife, who had gone shopping, had returned and were preparing dinner. Leo, hearing the sound of the door opening, the old Paul who was reading the newspaper looked for the sound. After seeing Leo, he cried out with a hint of surprise. You know, since Leo said he would do that after the strange invention, the number of times they met in this month's time can be counted with trembling hands. Uncle Paul, Aunt Lynn. Leo greeted and closed the door. At this moment, Aunt Lynn, who wanted to say hello to Leo, found the nurse following Leo, and immediately asked with a hint of surprise, Leo, what is behind you? Hearing this, Leo smiled slightly, and introduced the function of a nurse to the two elderly people. After hearing Leo's introduction, the old Paul said excitedly, My child, you have made an incredible invention. We are proud of you. Child, Aunt Lynn hugged the nurse with a happy face. Aunt Lynn, Emma asked me to tell you that she won't come back for dinner tonight. Looking at the excited old couple, Leo smiled and changed the topic. After all, they were too excited and they were getting older. Getting too excited is never a good thing. Oh, Emma is such a hard-working kid. Old Paul praised Emma with the expression of a good boy. Hearing this, Leo, who knew what Emma was going to do, froze instantly. Yes. Yes, Emma is a good boy, and she is probably getting money with someone else now. Just as Leo and his family were having a conversation around the nurse, Howard had a frenzied look on his face at this time, because he saw the whole process of Leo creating a nurse from the surveillance camera, and he even tried his best to make a nurse. Take a closer look. Although Hall helped you turn off the surveillance cameras in the open, do you think the great Stark will only install one set of surveillance cameras? How naive, young man. Howard stroked the mustache at the corner of his mouth proudly with a smile. He couldn't wait to see the expression on the great thief inventor when he saw him. As for how to find Leo, Howard is one of the founders of the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau. That kind of scientific method that has never been seen before, and that magical symbol, I have to admit, you are a genius. Howard walked out of the gate of his house in a low voice, ready to look for Leo's trace, but he didn't notice that his words were heard by his son, Tony Stark, whom he met head-on. Looking at his father who had fallen into his own world, Tony shrugged his shoulders, with a puzzled expression on his face. This was the first time he heard his arrogant father call someone a genius. Thinking of this, the young Tony couldn't help showing a little curiosity with an expression on his face. He walked into the place where his father had just come out, his father's office. After a long while, Tony, who had watched the surveillance several times, still looked shocked. At this moment, even the proud he had to admit that the black ball was an incredible creation. The next day, Leo just got up in the morning and was washing when he heard old Paul's voice. Leo, a handsome gentleman is looking for you, he said he is your friend. Oh, hearing old Paul's voice, Leo responded, rinsed his mouth, wiped off the water stains on his face, and walked out with a face full of doubts. You must know that he doesn't have any friends here. Looking at Leo with a puzzled face, the middle-aged man who claimed to be Leo's friend put a smile on the corner of his mouth and said, Hello. Leo, I'm Howard Stark. Hearing the introduction of the man in front of him, the corners of Leo's eyes twitched a few times. Thinking of the previous experimental institution with the suffix of Stark, a bad thought floated in his heart, and he said, I don't think I know you, this gentleman. Really, but I think the nurse will know me. Howard smiled slightly, pointing at the nurse who slipped out of Leo's door, with a frenzy flashing in his eyes. He couldn't wait to study this magical technology. Seeing the nurse who rolled behind him on his own wheel, Leo kicked the frustrated nurse. Looking at Howard with a smile on his face, he knew that Howard had caught him in some way. The laboratory stole materials to make nurses, and even called out the nurse's name. Thinking of this, Leo didn't deny it anymore, and said with a bit of vigilance, So what is Mr. Stark going to do this time? Are you going to call the police and arrest me? No. Howard waved his hand and said, How could those people catch you who possesses magical power? Hearing Howard's words, Leo's pupils shrank slightly, knowing that Howard had discovered his mutant ability, and when he was about to say something, Howard continued, How about it, Mr. Leo, don't invite me, do you want to sit down? Hello, Mr. Stark, here is your coffee. Do you want to have breakfast together? At this moment, the old Paul who had just entered the room to prepare coffee for Howard came out with the coffee, and saw that he was still standing at the door behind Howard. He said to Leo with a tone of reproach, "Why do you still let Mr. Stark stand? It is really rude. Come in." Hearing what old Paul said, Leo couldn't help but let Howard in. Hearing this, Howard shook his beard a few times in satisfaction, and said to the two expressionless bodyguards who had been following behind him, "You guys wait outside." Yubai followed Leo and came to the living room. "You chat." After Leo and the two sat down, the old Paul smiled, and after saying something to the two, he gave up the space for conversation and left the living room. Although Howard is conceited, it does not mean that he is out of the world, so after seeing the guard on Leo's face, he said with a smile, "Mr. Leo, you can rest assured that I am here this time. What malice, although some of the materials you used are indeed precious, they are nothing to me at all." "Then why did you come to see me? When I called out the nurse's name, you must have guessed it." "Yes, I have already learned about the nurse's manufacture and function through the surveillance video." Surveillance video. Leo was a little stunned. You must know that Hall was talking to him, and all the surveillance footage about him has been deleted. Hall only knows a set of monitoring equipment. As if understanding Leo's thoughts, Howard wiped his beard with his fingers and explained proudly. Hearing this, a gleam of understanding flashed in Leo's eyes, and then he said, "Then you are here this time for the nurses?" "Oh, no, to be precise, it is for you. You must know that I am also a great inventor. I want to invite you to join Stark Industries and come and discuss this amazing technology with me," Howard said with a full face. "Expect to say." Hearing this, Leo was taken aback, and when he was about to speak, Emma, who had not returned all night, walked in with tired steps, and then Emma said, "He will not agree, because he is about to become EO, the boss of the group." Emma, Leo, IO Group. Leo was stunned for a moment, and understood the meaning of the name as soon as he thought about it. At this moment, Howard, who was interrupted and was about to get angry, turned his head and saw Emma. Looking at Emma's beautiful face, his anger disappeared instantly, and a charming smile hung on his face and said, "I don't know, do you have the honor to invite the beautiful lady to have dinner with you? I'm not interested in old men." Hearing this, Howard instantly petrified, old man, echoing in his mind. Emma sat down gracefully opposite Howard, looked at Howard who seemed stupid, with a smile on her face, and said, "Although Leo will not join Stark Industries, the EO Group can in Stark Industries collaboration." "Oh, beautiful lady, what a bold idea you have." In an instant, Howard understood the meaning of Emma's words. "You can call me Emma." An elegant smile appeared on Emma's face. Leo was stunned as he watched the exchange of words between the two people in front of him. He never knew that Emma was so talented in business negotiations. Half an hour later, Emma and Howard finally reached an agreement and ended the conversation. Immediately, Howard said to Leo with a smile on his face, "Then Mr. Leo, see you tomorrow." After finishing speaking, he left Leo's house. After Howard closed the door, Leo had a look of resentment, because their transaction conditions included that he would go to conduct research with Howard tomorrow. Leo said, "You just sold me. I thought you'd use your mutant powers on him and just take him down. How can you say it's a sale? You are just the most important part of the deal. Besides, I tried my ability on him just now. I don't know why, but he seems to be able to block my ability," Emma explained. Howard, who had just walked out of the door at this time, reached out and touched his watch, and whispered, "Fortunately, the mind-shielding device was prepared in advance." "Block your ability." Leo was slightly taken aback. "Stop talking about this, Leo, let me tell you about the result of my negotiation with Mr. Stark just now," Emma said to Leo with a hint of excitement, knowing that this was her first step to success. "Emma, I believe in you, do everything according to your wishes, you go to rest first, you haven't slept all night, you should be tired." "Thank you, Leo," Emma said moved, and then, under Leo's urging, she returned to her room. After Emma closed the door, looking at the nurse who had been following behind him, Leo bent over and hugged the nurse, looked at the wide-eyed nurse with a cute face, and murmured in a low voice, "That's not bad. I happen to be able to create my battle suit openly. In order to avoid some troubles, I still need a battle suit to hide my other identity. What do you think?" Nurse. Quote. Hearing Leo's words, the nurse blinked her eyes, still with a cute face. Seeing the nurse's expression, Leo smiled slightly, put down the nurse, took out the black mask that covered half of his face from his arms, and took it. When it reached his face, the figure flashed and disappeared. Because during this period, Leo spent all his time creating nurses, so in Leo's house, the law and order that had been improved a lot because of Leo has now returned to the original chaotic state, even less than half a day after he came out. Within hours, he solved 3 robbery cases and 1 rape case. Using his thoughts to float in the air, Leo looked for the next person to be rescued. At this moment, there was a huge explosion sound in the distance, followed by the continuous screams. Hearing this chaotic sound, Leo teleported there with a thought. The chaotic crowd was mixed with the helpless voices of the police, but obviously these were in vain, because at the center of the chaos at this time, there were 2 policemen lying in a pool of blood. Since these frenzied robbers dared to kill the policemen, so how do you guarantee yourself that these won't be the next ones? George Stacy, who just passed his 30th birthday, stared nervously at the door of the bank. As a policeman, he had already put his own life and death aside, and having participated in many big scenes, he should not have produced the current name. It was a nervous mood, but now his heart seemed to return to the time when he took part in the mission for the first time, just because his wife happened to bring his young daughter Gwen Stacy to the bank to withdraw money today. Listen up, the cops outside. Hurry up and prepare the helicopter for us according to our request, otherwise, it won't be you cops who will die next time. Maybe it's this cute little girl. The bandit dragged out a little girl with blonde hair from the hands of his companion behind him. Seeing this little girl, Officer Stacy's brain was like a bomb, and it was booming, because this little girl was his daughter Gwen, and even now he saw that he was pressed to the ground, already hysterical wife. Gwen. Stacy's lips trembled. Her eyes, which are usually called eternal firmness by her partner, have even lost focus and fell into a dazed state. Seeing this, the surrounding policeman couldn't help but look forward to this outstanding colleague. He cast a sympathetic look. Obviously, the policemen around knew the identity of the little girl. You can't scare my villain. My dad is a policeman. He will arrest you. At this moment, a crisp voice full of courage came from the mouth of the little girl who was taken hostage, making the still chaotic scene. It became quiet in an instant. Haha, it turned out to be Tiaozi's daughter. I hate Tiaozi the most, so you go to hell. Hearing what the little girl said, the robber with his face full of flesh trembled a few times, and roared angrily. About to pull the trigger of the pistol in his hand, seeing this, there were exclamations from the crowd, and Officer Stacy had already opened his mouth in horror, and leaned against the car without a sound. I think such a cute little girl full of courage shouldn't lose her life. What do you think? At this moment, a slightly low voice came from the robber's ear, and the next moment the robber found that he was holding his hand. The little girl disappeared, and then he was horrified to find that the little girl who had just been taken hostage by him was brought to the police by a man wearing a mask. You are very brave. Rubbing the little girl's soft blonde hair, Leo laughed. Hearing what Leo said, the little girl showed a shy expression. Thank you, sir, thank you. Although the inexplicable appearance of the man in front of him with his daughter made Officer Stacy terrified, but it couldn't stop the ecstasy of her daughter being rescued after despair, and then rushed up, hugging herself. His daughter thanked him loudly, and all the policemen around couldn't help showing gratitude. After all, Leo saved a young life. Bang! At this moment, a gunshot caught everyone's attention. Looking for the reputation, it turned out that it was the gangster with a bloody face who shot Leo. Die! The robber grinned grimly, accompanied by the sighs of the surrounding crowd, as if he had foreseen the scene of Leo falling in a pool of blood. But what happened in the next moment caused the robbers to fall into panic, while the surrounding crowd let out an unbelievable exclamation. They saw that the yellow-orange bullet was about to hit the man. It stopped strangely, as if trapped in an invisible wall. Under the unbelievable gazes of people around him, Leo reached out and took down the bullet that had lost power, which was blocked by the wall of thought power. Looking at the gangster with a frightened face, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and then he shook the bullet in his hand. Go out, and launch the teleport on the bullet in the next moment, and then the bullet penetrated the gangster's palm with a stream of blood. Fire! Feeling the sharp pain in his hand, the gangster with a face full of flesh couldn't help but screamed at his companions in horror. The next moment, the robbers standing next to the gangster used their hands. The held machine gun fired. Swish, swish, countless bullets swept towards Leo under everyone's horrified eyes with the scream of slipping through the air. Leo looked at the incoming bullets and wanted to teleport subconsciously, but found that he was standing among a group of policemen. As long as he dodges, these bullets would definitely hurt many people. Thinking of this, neonly it spewed out and turned into a huge invisible wall to block the incoming bullets, and then Leo walked towards the bandits with light steps. The bullets shot more and more, and in just a few seconds, the neonly wall in front of Leo was full of bullets. Seeing this scene, all the gangsters couldn't help turning pale, and looked at Lee, who was still walking slowly. Oh, with a look of horror, the gun in his hand stopped shooting unconsciously. You monster! The gangster with a face full of hatred took out a grenade from his waist, pulled off the safety ring and was about to throw it, but Leo disappeared behind the bullet wall, and went down. For a moment, he appeared in front of the gangster, and then stunned the gangster with a precise elbow. He reached out to grab the safety grenade, and when the grenade was about to detonate, he threw it into the sky. Boom! There was a violent explosion, which was as eye-catching as fireworks in the air. At this time, Leo kept flashing among the gangsters. It was only 2 breaths, and the last moment was extremely ferocious. The bandits were all knocked unconscious by Leo. Seeing the gangster lying on the ground, everyone present fell silent, and the next second there was a sudden burst of cheers, and eager shouts rushed into Leo's ears. Watching these people shouting, "Heroes," a sense of responsibility quietly floated in Leo's heart, a sense of responsibility to be worthy of the word, hero. While thinking about it, the masked Leo smiled and disappeared, but what he didn't know was that his smile and the rescue scene were completely photographed by the reporter hidden in the crowd, and the next day occupied the headlines of the major newspapers. A hero or a threat? The mysterious man saves the children. Where did he come from? Early in the morning, about Leo subduing those vicious gangsters yesterday, after the newspaper reports, there was an uproar. Although many people were cautious about Leo who suddenly appeared, they all praised his behavior yesterday. Of course, Leo didn't have time to pay attention to these things in the newspaper, because he followed the agreement to find Howard early in the morning, and now the two have fallen into a research state. Howard looked at Leo with full interest in making a simple magic circle that aggregated energy, and was amazed. He had never imagined that just a few simple symbols would attract the ability factors floating in the air, and then play out available energy. After Leo taught Howard the magic symbol of gathering energy, Howard rushed to his own laboratory with ecstasy on his face, and fell into a state of obsession. Feeling Howard's enthusiasm for knowledge, Leo admired him, but after seeing the materials sent by Howard's order, Leo entered the experimental state with the same enthusiasm as Howard. While Leo and Howard were experimenting, Tony, who had just completed a new type of integrated circuit, walked out of his own laboratory with a tired face. Tony feels that he has not been like himself for the past 2 days. According to his personality, he should be picking up girls now, and he should be responsible for bringing those beauties to his bed for in-depth communication, but now he worked his way into the laboratory from dawn to dusk. Of course he knew the reason, that is, he felt the pressure from the person who invented the nurse, although Tony didn't want to admit it. As soon as he walked out of the laboratory, Tony heard a piece of news that interested him from the female secretary of the research institute who was twisting her waist and wanted to hook him up. His father came here early in the morning with a young man, and got into the laboratory. Hearing this, Tony's heart moved, inexplicably thinking of the person who invented the nurse. Oh, baby, take me to that young man's laboratory. Tony patted the female secretary's buttocks lightly, and said with a smile on his face. Okay. The female secretary, who lay limply on Tony's body, as if her bones had disappeared, said coquettishly, and then led Tony to the outside of Leo's laboratory. Pushing away the female secretary who was sticking to her body, Tony knocked on Leo's door regardless of the disappointment on the charming female secretary's face. Just after smelting some metals as raw materials for the suit, Leo heard a knock on the door. Thinking it was Howard, Leo put down the tools in his hand and opened the door of the laboratory. You are. Looking at the young man who was very similar to Howard outside the door, Leo was full of doubts. I'm Tony Stark, Tony introduced. This was the first time he introduced himself to a man, so he seemed a little uncomfortable. Are you Howard's son? Is it that obvious? Tony froze for a moment. You look so alike, Leo said with a smile, and then added in his heart, the same farts, the same slack. At this moment, Howard rushed over anxiously, because he discovered an important problem. Tony, why are you here? As soon as he entered the door, Howard saw Tony standing at the door. Tony curled his lips and explained, I watched your surveillance video before. Hearing this, Howard was taken aback for a moment, and then said, since you have also discovered about Leo, then it is necessary for you to listen to what I just discovered. For Tony, he was very satisfied. In terms of talent, Tony's talent was higher than his. All that was missing was the accumulation of time, so he didn't want Tony to waste a lot of time researching the magic technology brought by Leo because of his lack of experience. What's the matter? Leo was a little curious. After all, it wasn't long before Howard took those magic symbols from him. Leo, to be honest, your magic symbols are really strange. But I found that if I want to understand those symbols, I have to completely forget what I have mastered before, and even put my previous recognition. It's only possible to push it until it's fully known. Obviously I can't do it. Is it because they are two different development systems? Leo asked after thinking for a while. That's it. I'm used to using the principles I have now to interpret the things I discover. Even the perception of the world in the past few decades needs to be completely changed to master your magic symbols. You mean to completely overthrow the current worldview? Tony said in surprise. Exactly, so Tony Howard looked at Tony. Don't worry, I'm a genius Tony. How could I give up my cute integrated circuits and learn those strange symbols halfway? And I don't think technology will be worse than this so-called magic technology. Tony looked confident color. In this case, Leo, I won't bother you. Hearing Tony's words, Howard stroked his beard in satisfaction, and walked out first. Obviously, after understanding these things, he didn't want to waste time on these things talisman symbols, although they are magical. I'm leaving too. Today I have an appointment with a new girlfriend to spend the night together. Tony whispered to Leo, smiled triumphantly, and left Leo's laboratory. Seeing this, Leo smiled indifferently, and turned his attention to his battle suit again. 3 days later, looking at the mass of black metal in front of him, Leo smiled with satisfaction because his battle suit was ready. With a look of expectation on his face, Leo covered the mass of black metal with his hands. The next moment, the black metal spread along Leo's arm like a liquid according to Leo's thoughts. The black battle suit appeared on Leo. The battle suit perfectly fits Leo's body, without any extra embellishments. Only a black mask covering the upper half of his face. But if you look closely, you will find that the black battle suit, at the joints of the battle suit some silvery dots flickered, like stars twinkling in the dark night, and these flickering light dots were magic symbols melted together with those metals, and it was precisely because of the existence of these magic symbols that Leo's the battle suit can be switched between liquid and metal, and even after being transformed into solid metal, it can withstand the impact of nearly 10 tons. Facing the mirror, Leo nodded in satisfaction. The black battle suit on his body turned into liquid again and slowly faded off, turning into a mass of black liquid the size of a human head. Then the cross on the back of Leo's hand, which was given by Aunt Lynn, flashed. After the hazy light, the black liquid disappeared. Of course, this is not the original function of the cross, but a small summoning device made by Leo using Heimerdinger's method of summoning his fort. He was annoyed by the suit, but it wasn't until Leo searched his memory for the way Heimerdinger summoned his turret. That is to imprint a space symbol on the battle suit, so that those things that are branded with space symbols will be stored in an unknown mysterious space. Of course, because too many space symbols will interfere with each other, everyone can only have 3. The last thing is to leave a summoning symbol on the things you use frequently, so that you can summon those things that are branded with space symbols at any time. Of course, unlike Heimerdinger's summoning medium, which is a screw cap, Leo chose the silver cross in his hand as the summoning medium. Touching the silver cross in his hand and remembering the flickering dots on the battle armor, Leo raised his mouth slightly and said, "From today onwards, your name will be Starry Night." Since Emma decided to set up her own company, she has been in a state of busyness. Of course, Leo cannot escape the fate of being busy. After all, the main products of their company are healing products such as nurses. Of course, if you want to launch it as a product, if you only rely on Leo to make the finished product, even if you are exhausted, Leo will not be able to achieve the goal of occupying the market. Therefore, after Leo made his own suit, he fell into the development and mass production. In the experiment of the method, in the end, with the help of Howard and Tony to develop together, after spending a month, Leo finally made a machine that can mass produce magic arrays. Of course, the premise of mass production is the need to use made a sample of the magic circle diagram. So far, those instruments that can heal wounds finally have a new name, life healing instrument. It must be said that under Emma's request, Leo did not design the same magic array as the nurse's body, but only designed a simplified version. Not only can't have some basic judgment ability to actively heal you like a nurse, moreover, the mechanism of automatic energy replenishment was cancelled. In this way, even the body used to make the life-healing device became a common material, which greatly reduced the production cost and made it possible for everyone to own it. Since the life-healing instrument can't take the initiative to replenish energy, then the IO group has mastered an exclusive resource, that is, it needs to add the energy block specially developed by Leo to use it. Of course, the energy block has a number of uses, and only in this way in order to create a steady stream of wealth for the company. Of course, in order to meet the needs of different people, there are also many styles of life therapy instruments, such as the portable style that narrows the treatment range for the convenience of portability, and the family style that can be placed at home, as well as large-scale treatment institutions such as hospitals. Made-to-order large styles. It is worth mentioning that Emma asked Leo to make a self-destruct device in order to prevent others from analyzing the magic circle inside. As long as the life-healing device is turned on privately, then the magic circle will self-destruct immediately, and eventually you also and just get a bunch of junk. Of course, some people have also put their ideas on the energy block. Leo and the others have thought of this a long time ago, so since Leo developed this energy block, they have given the last step of making the ability block, the task of adding mysterious metals to a person Leo and the others absolutely trusted was expelled from Stark Industries by Howard as Director Hall. After all, after Director Hall was controlled by Emma's spiritual power, it was impossible for Howard to hand over such an important research institution to him, so he was directly expelled from Stark, but the fate of Director Hall was determined by Emma. After knowing it, he recruited into the IO group. After all, this is also a pretty good management talent. As for loyalty, under Emma's mind control, it is impossible for him to betray. After the uproar caused by the launch of the initial life therapy instrument, it has been 6 months. Because of the popularization of the life therapy instrument, the EO group is developing at an astonishing speed, and the group value is almost every day keep rising. It is worth mentioning that during the past few months, because of the research on a new product, the father-son relationship between Leo and Stark has always been good, especially Tony. Because of the halo of genius in his own, he has a bad personality with a high fart and a poisonous tongue, and he has so few friends that it is outrageous, so he and Leo, who is also a genius in Tony's eyes, have become good friends. Hey, Belle, is Leo here? Tony came to Leo's new home early in the morning, an old manor with enough age that Emma bought with a lot of money. Hello, sir, Mr. Leo just came out of his laboratory. The butler who opened the door for Tony was the butler hired by Leo's family not long ago. A head of neatly combed gray hair, a slightly wrinkled face full of rigidity and seriousness, a middle-aged man in a dark butler tuxedo, straightened his back. This is a meticulous the middle-aged man, this is Leo's housekeeper Belle Dennis. Stewards play a very important role in many families, and some stewards only work for one family at a time. Now, the huge manor of Leo's family absolutely needs a trusted steward to take care of it, so Belle Dennis was recruited by Emma. Since Emma recruited him, there is no need to consider the issue of trust, because Emma's mutant ability is the biggest reliance. Belle, go get busy. I'll find him myself. Obviously Tony was very familiar with Leo's house, so he said to Belle as soon as he entered the door. Hearing this, Belle bent slightly towards Tony, and walked out of Tony's sight with steps that seemed to be measured with a ruler. Shouting all the way, Tony rushed to Leo's bedroom and saw Leo, who was putting on his shirt. Hey, Leo, you have such a good figure. Looking at Leo's well-proportioned muscles, Tony said enviously. Tony, if you don't knock when you come in next time, I'll throw you out. Leo said lightly after buttoning his white shirt. Hey, buddy, I'm here this time to invite you to my party, and it's hard for me to wait for my parents to go out. Tony didn't care about Leo's threat at all. After all, such a threat, he have heard it dozens of times. You're messing around again. Thinking of the scene where Tony invited a room full of popular models, and there were only him and Tony, Leo felt a headache for the ridiculous behavior of Tony, a bad friend. How can you make a fuss? I just give those women a chance to get close to the genius Tony. Hearing this, Leo was speechless, and then asked curiously, where did your parents go this time? Who knew they went there in their classic car? Tony shrugged and said nonchalantly. Sorry, Tony, I have something to do with Emma today, so I can't come to your party. No way, dude, I'm here to invite you. Tony wailed. Are you looking for Leo to play around with you again? At this moment, Emma appeared in a long black dress like a beautiful black swan. Emma, you have become beautiful again. If you and Leo hadn't established a relationship, I would definitely not be able to resist. Looking at Emma, Tony's eyes lit up. Even if the relationship is not confirmed, I will not be interested in you, you are too bothered. Emma smiled, walked gracefully, walked to Leo, and straightened Leo's collar. It hurts my heart to say that, I'd better go. Go enjoy my party alone. Tony left Leo's house with a sad expression. After Tony left, Emma thought about it and asked, Leo, why did you say that Professor X contacted you suddenly this time? I know that you didn't get along well with Logan because of what happened to Logan on 3 Mile Island last time. Leo interrupted Emma's words and said seriously, I know, Emma, but he is one of the 2 leaders of the mutants. No matter what, we need to go to X Academy. Then see how he is. What do you want to do? Determine whether he is an enemy or a friend. When Leo and Emma rushed to the X Academy in Staten Island, New York, Obadiah Stine, who had been relied on by Howard as his right-hand man, hung up the phone with a smile on his face. Thinking that after the death of Howard and his wife, the big Stark industry would fall into his hands, he couldn't help but want to open a bottle of good red wine to celebrate. Don't blame me, Howard, although you are very good to me, as long as you are above me, then I can't go any further. Obadiah whispered softly. As for Tony, he also found a place for Howard's heir. He thought that the terrorist organization, Hydra, who wanted to win him over would help him deal with it. Xavier School for Gifted Teenagers. Looking at the name on the door, Leo and Emma walked into the so-called X school. Just stepped into the school gate, Emma's old acquaintance, cellmate Scott appeared in front of them. Emma, Scott greeted slightly excitedly. Scott, your new glasses are good. Emma smiled slightly. Welcome to X Academy, Mr. Leo, thank you for saving me. No, do you know what Professor X invited us to do? Leo asked after expressing that he didn't care. At this moment, Scott showed a listening attitude, and then Scott smiled slightly. Professor X just contacted me and asked me to take you to his office. After speaking, he turned to Leo and the 2 of them. Make a gesture of please and lead the way ahead. This is really a paradise. Seeing those mutant children running and playing happily in this X Academy, Emma said with a little sigh as if thinking of her wandering days before. Indeed, he protects these children very well, which I have to admire. Leo nodded in agreement. As if hearing Leo's words, Scott showed a reverent expression on his face and said, Professor X is a great man, he gave us a warm home. Scott, who is this? Aurora, Chin. This is Mr. Leo and Emma. Scott greeted the people coming, and replied to Aurora who was asking. Hello, my name is Aurora. Aurora, who has a dazzling chocolate dark skin and beautiful silver hair, introduced generously with staring eyes. I'm Chin. Chin whispered shyly, following behind Aurora, flicking her wine-red hair lightly. Hello. Looking at the 2 lovely girls in front of him, Leo greeted with a smile, but Emma turned the soft flesh around his waist a few times with his little hands, and Emma's warning sounded in his mind voice, don't laugh. Mr. Leo, you are so handsome. But what are you doing in our school? Looking at Aurora, who was a few years younger than himself, Leo couldn't help feeling a little fond of this straightforward temper, and then said, pretty girl. I also want to know why your Professor X came to us. Aurora, Chin, I have to take Mr. Leo and the others there. Scott said apologetically. After smiling apologetically at the 2 beautiful girls, Leo and Emma finally came to Professor X's office after passing through a long corridor. Seeing Leo and Leo coming in hand, and after giving a thankful look to Scott who left, Professor X said to Leo, tea or coffee? Tea, Thank you. He sat on the sofa unceremoniously, looked at Professor X who was busy pouring tea, and under Emma's worried eyes, Leo said in a cold tone, "What's the matter? Tell me." Professor X did not speak in the tone of Leo, but with a gentle smile on his face, he put the tea in his hand in front of Leo and Emma, and said to Leo with an apologetic expression, "I'm really sorry about what happened last time. I'm sorry. Apologize for controlling your affairs last time." Looking at the sincere Professor X in front of him, Leo was stunned. He couldn't imagine that such a powerful person would talk to him in a gesture of asking for forgiveness, and then he heard Professor X say, "About you, my friend Logan, since you left last time, he has recovered, but he seems to have lost his memory. Although I have been looking for his traces during this time, it is a pity that I did not record his mind waves. So even if I want to find him through a special instrument, it is impossible." Speaking of this, Professor X's apology was beyond words. Looking at Professor X's clear and sincere eyes, Leo put away the bluntness on his face, picked up the green tea, took a sip, and said, "Thank you for helping me notice Logan's whereabouts. This is what I should do." Professor X smiled gently. As the conversation with Professor X deepened, Leo discovered more and more the greatness of the man in front of him. Leo admired his selfless dedication to mutants, and as Leo gradually weakened his respect for Professor X, Leo finally knew why Professor X asked them to come here. Be a teacher. Leo was stunned. "Yes, I would like to invite you and Emma to come here as teachers for these children. They need correct guidance. I think you and Emma are suitable candidates." Hearing this, Leo's first reaction was to refuse, but when Leo saw Emma's expression, he swallowed the words that were already on his lips. "Leo, I think." At this moment, Emma's voice sounded in Leo's mind. "If you want to do it, I support you." Before Emma finished speaking, Leo affirmed Emma's idea. Hearing this, Emma gave Leo a grateful look, and then said to Professor X, "I am willing to teach here, but the time may be much less. After all, I am still managing a company." As for Leo, quote, "Don't look at me, my time is even more uncertain. Maybe I won't take a class once a year, and I'm not a good teacher." Leo waved his hand and quickly refused. "That would be great. As for you, Leo, you can come whenever you have time." Hearing what the two said, Professor X heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. Leo and the two had a hearty lunch at X Academy, while Emma had already entered the role of a teacher in the afternoon. After listening to Emma's psychology class for a while, Leo came to the corridor outside the classroom. "I plan to leave here after Emma finishes this lesson." Right here, Leo's cell phone rang, and he pressed the answer button. It was the butler Belle's call, and then he said, "What's the matter?" "Belle. Mr. Leo, there is a message from Stark just now." Belle's tone was a bit heavy. "What's up?" "The Stark couple died in a car accident." Hearing Belle's words, Leo's brain buzzed, his face was full of disbelief, and he murmured, "How is it possible?" When Leo saw Tony, it was completely dark. Emma wanted to come and comfort Tony, but Leo stopped Emma. After all, Tony is such an arrogant person with such a fragile side. You don't want too many people to see it. Seeing Tony sitting alone on the sofa, as if he had turned into a very quiet sculpture, Leo called softly, "Tony." Immediately, he took a light step and sat quietly beside Tony, without saying a word. Leo knew that what Tony needed now was not comfort from chatter, but the quiet company of his friends. After a long time, Tony moved slightly, and then slowly said with a sad tone as if he was talking to himself, "Because he spends more time on inventing than me, so sometimes I hate him very much, and sometimes I even feel that there is not much difference between the presence and absence of his father, but it was not until the moment he was really gone that I realized how much he occupied in my heart." Quote. While Leo was quietly listening to Tony's story, Obadiah, who had already learned that Hydra had succeeded, looked excited, as long as he thought that after a good night's sleep tonight, he would become Stark tomorrow. The owner of the industry, he was excited. But now is not the time to sleep. Tony still exists after all. Fake a car accident. This Hydra really wants to come out. Hey, poor Tony, you must be very sad now, but don't worry, the killer of Hydra will send you to see your parents right away. Thinking of the phone call just now, Obadiah sneered at what the Hydra man said, and drank the blood like wine in one gulp. In the darkness, a silent machine-like figure quietly stared at Tony, who was slowly telling Leo about his sadness, and then he held a sniper instrument with a glint of light all over his body, which was in the hands of other people. The huge sniper gun that needs a fulcrum to maintain stability is no problem for his superhuman physique. He lifted the muzzle lightly without any trembling, stood, aimed, and pulled the trigger. A bullet much larger than ordinary sniper firearms shot at Tony with a howling sound. Danger. At the moment when the bullet was ejected, Leo's head went numb. Without any hesitation, he pushed Tony to the ground. In order to ensure safety, Leo's thoughts surged out instantly to protect the two of them. The sofa the two of them were sitting on just now was torn apart by a powerful bullet with shattered sawdust, leaving a huge crater on the wall behind the sofa. Tony touched Leo's painful head that was knocked on the ground because of too much force, and when he was about to speak, Leo's face changed drastically, and he reached out to press his shoulder, and then Tony's eyes blurred, and he appeared in a place he is familiar with, Leo's bedroom. And after Leo and the others disappeared, a few more powerful bullets shot in, devastating the room where Leo and the others were staying just now. Leo. Just now. Tony remembered the scene just now, and was very grateful to Leo. As for Leo's sudden teleportation power, although Tony was a little surprised, he was not surprised at all. After all, from the previous surveillance data he already knew that Leo would teleport. Tony, you stay with me. I'll go and see who is attacking you. Leo's eyes flashed brightly, and the man disappeared after he finished speaking. Leo did not return to the previous room, but teleported into the midair of Tony's house, and then used his thoughts to float in the air, and then on the back of his lowered left hand, the silver-white cross flashed a dim light, and then the black liquid spread from between Leo's, and the next moment Leo had put on Starry Night. In order to find the gunman just now, Leo quietly closed his eyes, and his thoughts gushed out, turning into threads of thoughts invisible to the naked eye, and then weaving them into a huge web of thoughts with a diameter of a kilometer around himself. Feeling suspicious finally, on the roof of a tall building 300 meters away from Tony's house, he sensed a breath different from ordinary people, and then Leo's figure flashed and came to this person. Messy brown hair, a pair of eyes without the slightest emotion, exuding a deadly murderous look all over his body. The moment he saw this person, Leo affirmed without any hesitation that this was the shooter who wanted to kill Tony just now, and immediately in a flash, he flashed behind this person, and punched this person fiercely on the head, but the next moment, the fist with a hint of metallic color collided with Leo's fist. Boom, the two punches collided, and Leo's expression changed. To Leo's surprise, the punch was unexpectedly powerful. He even felt that his hands were a little numb now. If it wasn't for the Starry Night, Leo would even feel that his current finger bones were broken under that fist. Bang, the gunshot rang out. Leo's figure flickered, dodging the bullets fired at his face, and then he swung an invisible sledgehammer at the man in front of him, trying to stun the man. Let Emma probe the memory to see who is trying to kill Tony. Unexpectedly, although the man couldn't see the psychic hammer, he seemed to feel it. He swung his left fist at the psychic hammer, and Leo also took this opportunity to see the man's left arm clearly. Metal arm. Leo was startled, but the man threw a black object at Leo after blocking the psychic hammer. Leo subconsciously used his thoughts to fix the black round object in the air, but in the next second, streaks of dazzling white light shot out from the black object. The glaring white light of the flash bomb was extremely dazzling in the dark night. Leo closed his eyes unconsciously, and then used his thoughts to build a defense for himself to prevent the enemy's sneak attack. But when Leo opened his eyes, he found that this man was actually jumped from the top of the 30-story building. Suicide. The thought flashed in Leo's mind, and then his figure flashed, teleported to the side of the building, looked down, and then saw the man who just jumped off, actually grabbed the wall of the building with his metal fingers. The outer wall, and then quickly slid down with his body. And that man obviously also saw Leo, so during the slide, he threw a black grenade downward. Boom. The grenade that fell first blew up a car amidst the roar, but fortunately there was no one in the car, but the car flew up with the roar, and fell towards the surrounding crowd. Seeing a mother and daughter who were about to be hit by a car, Leo's figure flashed and appeared next to the mother and daughter, and then his thoughts surged out to control the car that had turned into scrap iron, and put it aside. But when Leo saw the grenade falling from the sky and sprinkled on the crowd, Leo's face changed, and then he either slapped the grenade with his thoughts, or teleported to the side of the grenade, and kicked it away, making those who were constantly the falling grenade return to midair again. Boom, boom, boom. Continuous explosions sounded, making the crowd even more chaotic. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the man let go of his hand and jumped off the outer wall more than 10 meters away from the ground. Rolled a few times on the ground, and after the impact was removed, he mixed into the chaotic crowd. I want to run. Looking at the man's back, Leo snorted coldly, and then his thoughts surged out, and he slapped the man with Leo's anger. Boom. There was no surprise. Under the force of Leo's thoughts, the man's mouth was bleeding and he was shot flying, but the man took advantage of the force of the shot and used his own metal to fly backwards. With the palm behind his back, he took out a black bomb again and threw it at the crowd. Seeing this, Leo had no choice but to intercept the bomb again, and the man took advantage of this opportunity to disappear into the crowd. When Leo got rid of the bomb, Leo lost the figure of the man, and then disappeared with an ugly face. At this time, the chaotic crowd let out a loud exclamation after seeing Leo's disappearing figure, and then some strange names for Leo, Black Emperor, faintly spread from the crowd. Hearing the sound of the failure of the operation and Tony being rescued from the phone, Obadiah slammed the wine glass in his hand to the ground with a gloomy expression. The action failed, Hydra idiot, and vowed to help me get Stark Industries. This group of idiots. Now Tony's assassination will be known soon, and maybe they will suspect me after all. After Tony dies, I will be the biggest beneficiary. Obadiah roared in his heart. After a while, after he calmed down, a ruthless look appeared on his face. He gritted his teeth. From his desk, he took out a black pistol with a silencer, and fired several shots at his shoulder, thigh, and abdomen, then activated the latest life-healing device on his wrist, and wiped off the after fingerprinting. He smashed the window behind him suddenly, and after making the illusion that someone was running away, he cried out in pain. Soon, Obadiah's tragic situation was discovered by his family, and in a panic, they called an ambulance and then called the police. The next day, several pieces of news like nuclear bombs detonated the entire New York, and even the entire United States. The Starks died in a car accident. The Stark successor is assassinated. Obadiah, Stark's second largest shareholder, was shot several times and escaped by chance. The road to the demise of Stark Industries. Leo looked at the newspaper in his hand with a look of surprise. Originally, the Howards died and Tony was assassinated. Leo had already become very suspicious of Obadiah. After all, he was the biggest beneficiary of this series of events, but now he was also attacked, which made Leo doubt his own guess. Oh, Tony, this child is so pitiful. Old Paul, who was sitting on Leo's left, was also looking at a newspaper. After seeing the news, his face was full of pity, and Aunt Lynn, who was beside Old Paul, also felt pity. With a sad look on his face, he said with a look of hatred for those killers, those people should go to hell. On the contrary, Emma, who was lying on Leo's back, pointed to a page of the newspaper, and then telepathically said in Leo's mind, Black Emperor, your new nickname is good. Hearing Emma's words, Leo discovered that in one corner of the newspapers that reported the great changes in Stark Enterprises, he kicked the bomb last night and took control of the car to save the mother and daughter. This is a mysterious hero. Although I don't know who he is, many people who have saved people say that he is like a mysterious king who protects the people, and because he is wearing a black battle suit, everyone calls him named a hero, Black Emperor. Emma, I regret telling you this identity now. Hearing Emma's teasing laughter, Leo responded helplessly. Heck, hearing this, Emma kissed Leo's cheek lightly, and sat on Leo's right-hand side. At this moment, Belle, the housekeeper, brought Tony, who stayed at Leo's house for one night, to the dining table. Seeing Tony, Old Paul stuffed the newspaper under the table nervously. Uncle Paul, I've already seen it. Seeing the Old Paul's movements, Tony said lightly, then turned his eyes to Leo, and said, Leo, I'll go to the hospital to see Uncle Stan first. I'll go with you, Leo said, thinking of the mysterious killer and worrying about Tony's safety. Hearing this, he understood Leo's meaning and gave Leo a grateful look, but Leo pulled Emma up and said, Emma will go with us. Following Tony, Leo and the two saw Obadiah lying on the hospital bed. After telling Emma to check Obadiah's mind, Leo carefully observed Obadiah's expression. Tony, It's great that you're fine, Obadiah said with a pale face after seeing Tony. Hearing Obadiah's words, Tony's heart warmed up. He looked at the uncle who had watched him grow up and said, "Uncle Stan, I made you worry. I'm sorry about your parents." As for Stark now, Obadiah said hesitantly, "You don't have to worry about Stark. They want to see the depression of Stark Industries, and I am destined to disappoint them. Because I am Howard's son, Tony Stark." Tony's tone was flat but full of confidence. No killing intent towards Tony was observed on Obadiah's face, and Leo could only pin his hope on Emma when he was puzzled. "No, Leo, he has a mind-shielding device made by Howard." At this moment, Emma's annoyed voice sounded in Leo's mind. Hearing this, Leo sighed slightly. For some reason, he always felt that this Obadiah was not as simple as the kindness shown on his face now. Although he wanted to tell Tony how he felt, he saw Tony seeing him. After arriving at his Uncle Stan, a smile reappeared on the sad face. Leo finally swallowed the words in his mouth, but secretly made up his mind to pay more attention to Tony's safety during this time. After visiting Obadiah, Tony still came to Leo's house under Leo's insistence, but Tony asked Emma to announce two news to the outside through the IO group, and then in the next day's newspaper on the internet, Tony's picture once again dominated all the newspaper headlines. Tony Stark has become the chairman of Stark, the business empire, at the age of 21. Tony Stark announced his newly invented new weapon. Stark's glory will continue. Chapter 31. The gloomy sky, the continuous raindrops, the black umbrellas everywhere, and the flashing cameras in the hands of countless reporters. Today is the 7th day after the Howards passed away, and today is their funeral. Looking at Howard's tombstone and the rare serious face in Howard's photo, Leo said lightly to Emma beside him, "He was born to live in the eyes of everyone, and he will still be looked at by everyone after he dies." Focus. When Emma heard the words, she glanced around, and when she heard the joy and even cursing in the hearts of those around her, she frowned slightly, put away her abilities, and said disgustedly, "These people's the mind is really dark." Hee, Emma, if it was Howard, he would definitely say at this time, "Make people jealous, this is Stark, hee, in this sea of people, how many people are really sad. Maybe only those of us who are regarded as his friends will feel sad for his death." Leo was expressionless, but Emma, who was familiar with him, read sadness from Leo's eyes. "That's right, we're the only friends who feel sad. Mr. Leo, hello, I'm Nick Fury." With a jet black bald head, a black round eye patch, and the only one remaining eye that hides countless things, Leo looked at Nick Fury, who was showing kindness to him, and smiled. Stretched out of the umbrella, held hands that were already drenched in rain. "Hello." At this time, Belle, the housekeeper holding an umbrella behind Leo and Emma, saw that Leo's hands were splashed wet, so he couldn't help tilting the umbrella forward a little, blocking Leo's hand again, but completely ignore your already wet back. "You have a good housekeeper." Seeing Belle's actions, Nick Fury glared slightly at the man holding the umbrella for him, but the man just smiled when he saw this, showing a kind smile. "Are you?" Leo couldn't help asking, curious about the identity of the person holding the umbrella for Nick Fury. "Hello, Phil Coulson, a wage earner under Mr. Fury." Phil Coulson shrugged, pointed to the hand holding the umbrella, and indicated his identity as a wage earner. "Sorry, it's time for me to say goodbye to Howard." Leo smiled apologetically at the two of them, took a white chrysanthemum from Emma's hand, shook off the rain on it, and bent down to place it on Howard's tombstone before, looking at Howard's photo, he taunted sadly, "You are finally serious once." Looking at Leo's back, Phil asked with some doubts, "Why don't you just ask him to be our weapons consultant? Isn't he recommended by Howard?" Hearing this, Nick Fury showed a meaningful smile and said, "It's not yet time." Then he looked at his arm that was soaked by the rain, remembered the butler behind Leo, and said to Phil expressionlessly, "Let me get caught in the rain again, and I will deduct 1 month's salary." Then he turned and walked out of the cemetery. Obadiah looked at Leo and Emma, who were slowly leaving the cemetery, with a cold smile on his face, and said in his heart, "Thank you for saving Tony, I almost missed such an easy-to-deceive money-making machine." Yes, Obadiah knew from Tony who saved him, but Tony didn't disclose Leo's abilities, only saying that Leo escaped the killer's pursuit through the invention they developed. The Black Emperor, who came out, whether it was Hydra or Obadiah, thought it was an accident, and did not associate Leo with him. Now Obadiah has given up the idea of killing Tony, but completely regards Tony as a money-making machine. He needs Tony's talent, and he needs Tony to constantly develop new weapons, so that he can use Tony's talent to make Santa the fruit of K as more sweet, and it will be the time for Obadiah to harvest it. After Howard's funeral, everything returned to calm, and Tony's safety issue, after Leo carefully protected it for a month and found that there was no problem, Leo finally relaxed, especially after Tony hired after a bodyguard named Happy and Hogan. Leo was even more relieved. As time went by, after more and more people were helped by Leo, Leo's name of Black Emperor became more and more famous in the whole New York, and there were even many people who pretended to be rescued by Leo. People who were in danger. Of course, this is a very small number of people. But the most interesting thing is that as long as a reporter takes a picture of the Black Emperor, it will definitely become the headline of the next day. Heroes are never recognized overnight, and it took Leo nearly 10 years to get the recognition and support of this city. Seeing that the daily good daily task on the system disappeared after achieving an achievement, Leo sighed. Although the punishment disappeared, Leo also lacked a way to accumulate exchange points for a long time, and of course there were new ones. Task. Congratulations to the host for achieving the achievement. 1 day in 10 years, hereby reward the protagonist with a special item, Ankh of Rebirth. Achievement description. 10 years have been like a day. During these 10 years, this city has seen the perseverance of the host, and countless people have been helped by the host. Now you are worthy of the title of hero. Ankh of Rebirth. Hearing the reward from the system, Leo was taken aback for a moment. He wanted to take it out to see what it looked like, but was told by the system that once the reward was issued, it would be bound to him. He couldn't see it, so Leo could only blink his eyes, and continued to look at the new task that appeared. The host triggers the mission, Crisis Rescuer. Mission description. There are many crises hidden in this world. As a hero, when these crises appear, you must solve them. Task reward. Every time a crisis is solved, the fixed reward host will have a chance to draw a lottery. Depending on the size of the crisis resolved, other rewards will be issued. Mission restrictions. None. Time limit. None. The new mission looks good. Seeing the new mission, Leo raised his eyebrows, a flash of lightning flashed across his body, and then disappeared. In 10 years, in addition to allowing Leo to be recognized by the city, Leo also obtained new abilities by taking advantage of the benefits of the annual lottery draw. Quick healing. You can use your ability to transform your own energy into healing energy to help others heal their injuries quickly. Thunder and lightning controller. You can not only control lightning, but also summon and create lightning out of thin air. It is worth mentioning that when this ability was extracted, because the energy exceeded Leo's current physical limit, Leo was forced to use the exchange point of 5,200 points, increased the physical strength from 2 times to 10 times. In addition to these two abilities, Leo only got one item, the Noxus Guillotine. In addition, for 4 consecutive years, Leo has drawn something that made him laugh and cry. The red scarf of the young pioneers, the red underwear of the zodiac year, and the red headscarf of the chicken mother. And what makes Leo want to kill this system? The little angel who never misses out. So far, after 4 consecutive years of lottery draws, Leo even felt that his character had been exhausted, so Leo had 2 chances left for lottery draws, and planned to get another one through the welfare system after another days. Lottery chance. After saving enough 3 chances, test your character again. Our hero is back. Emma's voice came over as soon as Leo appeared. Time always favors some people. After nearly 10 years of precipitation, Emma has become more and more charming, especially in charge of the growing EO group, which is not weaker than Stark Industries. Against the background of the top business kingdom, Emma's temperament became more and more noble. Looking at Emma, who was wearing a white nightdress and reading a book like a noble queen, Leo smiled, rubbed his empty stomach, and said, "Have Uncle Paul and Aunt Lynn rested?" Hearing Leo's words, Emma raised her eyes from the book, saw Leo rubbing his belly, and smiled. "Eddie has always kept food for you. Uncle Paul and Aunt Lynn are old, always those who get sleepy easily, they have already rested. It's better to be Eddie." Leo raised his eyebrows and walked towards the restaurant. At this time, in the luxuriously decorated restaurant, there was a child about 10 years old, wearing a light-colored butler uniform, waiting quietly. When he saw Leo, who pushed the door and entered, a big smile appeared on his face. The smiling face shouted, "Teacher." Eddie and Dennis, the adopted son of the housekeeper Belle, and Leo's student, were brought to Leo by Belle 4 years ago, and they mainly learned magic technology from Leo. Chinese second-level mutants with physical abilities. Touching Eddie's soft black hair, looking at Eddie's black eyes, Leo said, "Eddie, thank you for your hard work. It's not hard, I'm going to be your housekeeper in the future." "Teacher." Eddie blinked his black eyes, walked to the dining table, and put the dinners that he had stored with his ability on the dining table one by one. "Your ability is so convenient." Leo praised the food that was still the same, and even the temperature was the same as it was just made. "Thank you, teacher, for your compliment." Eddie smiled and stood beside Leo, looking like a little butler. After eating a delicious dinner, Leo felt that he should reward his little housekeeper, so he said, "Eddie, you will become a good housekeeper in the future, so now to thank you for leaving me such a delicious meal. What reward do you want for dinner?" Hearing Leo's words, Eddie thought for a while, and said with the innocence and caution unique to children, "I want you, teacher, to take me for a drive." "You mean?" Hearing Eddie's words, Leo pointed to the sky with his finger, making a flying gesture. Seeing this, Eddie blinked his big black eyes, and nodded with anticipation. "Then, this time, you can't leak your mouth, or if Belle finds out, you will be scolded again." After speaking, Leo put down the tableware in his hand, wiped his mouth, reached out to hold Eddie's hand, and said yes. Eddie raised his eyebrows and said, "Are you ready?" Eddie nodded. Seeing this, Leo and the little guy disappeared into the restaurant in a flash. In midair, Leo wrapped himself and Eddie with his thoughts, quietly looking down at the bright lights below. Maybe because of the rain just now, there were no pedestrians on the street. This is a good place for a ride. Thinking of this, Leo smiled slightly at Eddie's excited little face, and suddenly moved, and then rushed into the clouds with Eddie's excited cry, and shuttled quickly. While Leo was taking Eddie for a drive in the air, Peter and Parker walked into a convenience store feeling lonely because of the quarrel with their Uncle Ben and their father. Peter picked up a bottle of milk, put it on the cash register, took out all the money in his pocket, and threw it in front of the fat cashier. The fat cashier glanced at the money thrown by Peter, and realized that it was not enough to pay for the milk, and reminded loudly, "It's $2.07. "I know." Peter helplessly took out his empty pocket, saw the box with change on the cash register, took out 2 cents from it and threw it in front of the fat cashier, but this obviously didn't work. Because his actions were completely seen by the fat man, he didn't get his milk, but was insulted by the fat man. "You paid for the people behind you, go home and ask your father to drink milk." "Money, let's buy milk again, baby. Don't talk about my dad," Peter said angrily, but compared to the fat cashier, his small body obviously has no deterrent effect. Boom! A bundle of beer passed Peter, who was glaring at the cashier angrily, and put it on the cashier counter. Seeing this, he knew that he was indeed blocking the people behind to pay, and Peter picked up his money angrily and walked towards the door but when he walked to the door, he heard a series of goods falling on the ground. Hearing the sound and looking around, I saw the long-haired man in sunglasses who was just behind him in line to buy beer. Taking advantage of the gap when the fat cashier was picking up things on the ground, he grabbed the money from the cash register and put it in the cash register. It was obvious that the product that had just dropped on the floor was made by this man. After the man who took the money noticed that Peter was looking at him, he picked up the bottle of milk that Peter wanted to buy on the cash register, threw it to Peter casually, and left quickly. After catching the milk, Peter didn't remind the cashier who was still picking up things. Instead, he felt that the man in the sunglasses had done it for himself. Thinking of this, Peter felt a sense of revenge, pushed the door and walked out. Just as Peter walked out of the store with a tinge of joy, the fat cashier who discovered that the money had been stolen rushed out yelling loudly. After seeing Peter, he pointed at the man in sunglasses who had already run to the opposite side, and looked at Peter anxiously. Said, "Hey, boy. Stop him for me." Hearing this, Peter shrugged and said with a smile on his face, "Does it have something to do with me?" Hearing Peter's words, the fat cashier had no choice but to chase after him, and then shouted while chasing. Seeing the funny appearance of the fat cashier running on the street like a ball, it felt like taking revenge on the guy who just insulted him. Like the cashier, Peter opened the bottle cap, drank a big mouthful of milk happily, turned his head and continued walking forward. Bang! Just after walking a few steps, a gunshot caught Peter's attention, and then Peter stopped, looking at the opposite street with a trace of curiosity, and then saw a figure he was very familiar with slowly fell to the ground. With a look of disbelief on his face, Peter walked over mechanically. After seeing Uncle Ben lying on the ground not far away, Peter rushed over in an instant. "Don't, Uncle Ben, don't, someone save him." Peter, who was kneeling on the ground, yelled in panic as he saw Ben Parker's chest overflowing with blood. Don't leave me." Feeling his Uncle Ben's breathing that was weakening, Peter hated himself extremely. If he hadn't slammed the door and left after arguing with Uncle Ben, making him come to look for him so late, his Uncle Ben, how could such a thing happen? Thinking of this, tears of regret poured out of Peter's eyes. At this moment, Leo, who was taking Eddie for a ride, heard the cries, looked around, and saw an injured old man and a crying young man, and said to Eddie, "Eddie, over there someone is injured, I'll send you back first." Then the figure flashed and sent Eddie home, and the next second, when Leo reappeared, he had already turned into the Black Emperor. Looking at the tearful young man, Leo squatted beside the injured old man, and comforted him, "It's okay." Hearing this, Peter, who was on the verge of despair, couldn't help raising his lowered head to look at the person who spoke. After seeing the hero, Black Emperor, hope suddenly rose in his heart, and he couldn't help holding Leo's arm, excitedly said, "Please save him, he is a good man." Feeling the power coming from his arm, Leo was very surprised, because the strength of the young man in front of him was surprisingly strong, but now is obviously not the time to delve into this issue. "It's okay," he said again with certainty. In the hopeful gaze of the young man, a warm golden light appeared on Leo's hand, and then he gently put it on the old man's wound, which was exactly the quick treatment that Leo had drawn before. Following Leo's treatment, in just a few seconds, the wound had completely healed, and even the bullet that had been injected was squeezed out by the continuously healing wound. Feeling that his Uncle Ben's breathing had calmed down, Peter looked at Leo in the black battle suit in front of him, and said with a hint of tears and gratitude, "Thank you. Thank you, Black Emperor." "Okay, he's fine, but I can't mend the blood. Pay attention to maintenance." Looking at the young man in front of him, Leo smiled at the young man and disappeared. Peter quietly picked up his Uncle Ben on his back, and walked slowly on the way home. Although Uncle Ben has been rescued by the Black Emperor, Peter is still terrified. He can't imagine that their family is losing Uncle Ben. What will become of it afterward? On the way, Ben Parker, who was on Peter's back, opened his eyes and called out weakly, "Peter." "It's me, Uncle Ben, sorry." Peter apologized sadly. "It's okay, I shouldn't be angry with you." Ben Parker raised his hand, touched Peter's face in the dark, wiped the tears on Peter's face, and said, "I remember I was shot, but now it's the Black Emperor, he saved you. I really want to thank him, he is really a role model for everyone. Remember what I told you before?" Ben asked Peter with praise. "Remember, you said that when you have the ability, you have the responsibility to help others." "Yeah, just remember it, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. It's like the Black Emperor who has persisted for 10 years. Hearing this, Peter paused slightly and fell silent. Peter, unknowingly, the two of Peter had arrived at the door of their house, and seeing Aunt May standing at the door, anxiously waiting for them, Peter felt even more guilty. What happened? Seeing her husband being carried on Peter's back, Aunt May couldn't help asking in doubt, and when Peter and the others entered the house, she even cried out aloud when she saw the blood stains on her husband's chest. "Are you hurt?" "Ben, I'm going to get the life-healing device." "May, I'm fine." Looking at his panic-stricken wife who was about to lose her mind, Ben said weakly, but how could Aunt May listen to it at this time, so Aunt May hurriedly brought their only wife home-used therapeutic device. "It's all right." Looking at his wife who had already turned on the healing device, Ben hurriedly said, "This healing device consumes a lot of energy, and their family is not a wealthy family. It's all right. If you knew something like this would happen, I'll buy you and Peter something you can take with you." Aunt May's eyes were red, with a hint of crying. "It's all right, I've been healed by the Black Emperor." Ben couldn't help but lifted his clothes when he was moved, and pointed to his chest that had been healed by Leo. Seeing this, Aunt May stretched out her hand to touch it, and finally she felt relieved, and said, "Ben, Do you remember who hurt you? Let's think about it. That person has long hair and is wearing sunglasses, and there is a fat man chasing him behind him, as if he robbed the fat man of his money. Ben recalled with a thoughtful expression. Hearing Uncle Ben's description, Peter suddenly thought of the man who robbed the convenience store. Thinking of this, he wanted to slap himself a few times. If he stopped that man at that time, how could Uncle Ben get hurt? You know, at that time, he could easily take down that man. Thinking of this, Peter couldn't help but think of the words of Uncle Ben just now, with great power comes great responsibility, and then secretly made a firm decision in his heart. Friday morning, School X, Professor X's office. Professor, you said you found Logan's trace. Hearing Logan's news, Leo was a little excited. Well, someone found him in Canada, and now I'm paying attention to the news there. Professor X turned the wheelchair under him and nodded affirmatively. For more than 10 years, because Emma would come to X Academy for classes whenever she had time, Leo needed to pick Emma up often, so he got along well with the mutant teachers in X Academy, especially with the professor. The relationship with him has improved a lot, so after hearing the professor's words, Leo politely replied, "Thank you, Professor." However, it is a pity that Professor X's spinal nerve was injured due to an accident, causing Professor X to sit in a wheelchair, and Leo's quick treatment and the life treatment device of the EO group are of no use to the nerves. There are other treatments that can be treated, but Professor himself refused. At this moment, Aurora, who has become a teacher in Academy X, knocked on the door and walked in. After saying hello to Professor X, he turned to Leo and said angrily, "Leo, you are from Academy X. Teacher, but for so many years, you can count the classes you have taught on one hand." Hearing Aurora's words, Leo was stunned for a moment. The classes he attended could be counted on one hand. Obviously he had never attended any class at all. Unexpectedly, Aurora would lie publicly. Thinking of this, Leo couldn't help but feel that his heart was not old, and then he sighed and said, "Well, I still have." "No, you have to go to class today, and you've said the excuse, you're busy, 58 times. Aurora stared at Leo's excuse. Ahem. Leo blushed, and thought, why are you so clear? Then he looked at Professor X for help, but he didn't want Professor X to avoid Leo's eyes and picked up the coffee in front of him, putting on an expression that has nothing to do with me. But I really don't know how to take body lessons. Leo spread his hands and looked helpless. No matter. You have to go to class today. Looking at Aurora's eyes that had gradually turned white and the turbulent airflow around his body, Leo could only say helplessly, "Okay." Seeing that his goal had been achieved, Aurora put away his abilities, and said with a raised corner of his mouth, "Then I will trouble you." Then he rushed out of Professor X's office and rushed to Chin's room. She just caught a teacher who taught her a class. Today she finally had time to go shopping with Chin. Thinking of this, Aurora was in a good mood and walked a little lightly. Now that he has promised others, Leo will do it. This is Leo's consistent code of conduct, so Leo tidied up his clothes a little and went to the children's classroom. Leo pushed open the door of the classroom, and the noisy classroom fell silent instantly. Then, under the gaze of a group of teenagers, he walked to the blackboard and said, "I'm Leo, your teacher today." Teacher. Hearing Leo's introduction, the young mutants couldn't help but look at each other. "I haven't seen you before. It stands to reason that you are so handsome. As long as I see you, I will never forget it." A pretty girl asked in her cheerful voice. "Ah, forgot to mention. Today is my first class," Leo explained with a smile. Looking at the mutant teenagers below, Leo grinned and said, "Although you didn't know me before, but after today's class you will definitely remember me. Because today's class is, ... Hearing the elongated voice, a group of children couldn't help staring at Leo closely. Seeing this, Leo smiled with satisfaction, and uttered the last two words, "Actual combat." Actual combat. As soon as Leo finished speaking, the mutant teenagers in the classroom didn't respond, but there was an exclamation from outside the door. Smiling at Scott passing by, Leo said, "Scott, I just want to find you." Hearing the words Leo looking for him in actual combat, Scott had a bad thought. "Looks like you've guessed it, Scott. I heard from Professor X about the thing you've already built." Seeing that Leo confirmed his conjecture, Scott's face changed slightly, and he said, "Well, I still have something to do, so I'll go first." "Wait." Seeing Scott, who was about to slip away, Leo had a thought, hooked his fingers at Scott, and the power of thought directly controlled Scott and dragged him in. Seeing that he couldn't escape, Scott could only say helplessly, "That device hasn't been tested yet." "Then let's test the actual combat simulator that Professor X said." "I'm still very interested," Leo said indifferently. "However, if you are not careful, you will get hurt." Scott was trying to make the final persuasion. "Don't worry, I'll act appropriately." Hearing Leo's words, Scott did not doubt the authenticity of Leo's words. After all, he knew Leo's strength. Looking at Leo's stubborn eyes, Scott finally nodded helplessly. Said, "Don't let them get hurt." With the bewildered mutant teenagers behind, Leo and the others came to a huge spherical building. The whole body of the building was silver, as if it was entirely made of metal. Looking at this strange building, the teenagers behind we couldn't help being a little excited in our days. "What is this?" Looking at this strange building, a young man with blonde hair and a full face asked. "This is an actual combat simulation device, which can simulate the real environment of various battlefields," Leo explained. Looking at Scott with a helpless face, Leo shrugged and said, "Don't blame me. Who told the professor and me speaking of this device? It just aroused my interest." It was still the blonde boy. After hearing Leo's words, he said with a belligerent expression, "So, how to fight? Didn't we let us one-on-one? It's so boring. Since it's an actual battle, then you all hit me." Hearing Leo's words, a group of teenagers couldn't help exclaiming, and then a boy with a timid face couldn't help saying, "This is too unfair. It's really unfair to you." "Then let's add your teacher Scott," Leo said indifferently after thinking for a while. "I mean it's unfair to you," the timid boy said with some worry. Hearing this, the corners of Scott's mouth couldn't help twitching, worried about him. "You are so naive. Scott, tell them about the situation. Don't go in for a few minutes." 3 minutes later, because the strength of many mutants was not suitable for fighting, only 4 teenagers were finally selected, plus Scott. A total of 5 people stood in front of Leo. 4 people. What are your names? Looking at the teenagers in front of him, Leo raised his eyebrows. "I'm John the Burning Man," the boy with blonde hair and a fierce face said. "Bobby the Iceman." This was a timid boy. At this time, the cheerful and pretty girl who just said that Leo was handsome in the classroom pointed to the big boy beside her and said, "I'm Katie the Phantom Cat. He's Peter the Steel Man." After writing down the names of the 4 people, Leo said, "Let's get started." As soon as the voice fell, Scott activated the device, and the next moment Leo had appeared in the forest. "Choose the battlefield in the forest. Want to limit my teleportation? Interesting." Looking at the densely packed trees, Leo smiled faintly. At this time, in the distant forest, the phantom cat Katie asked Scott in a low voice with an unbelievable expression, "Teacher, does he really have so many abilities? And he has reached the 3rd level." Quote. Hearing this, Scott nodded and said, "That's why I chose the forest battlefield, hoping to restrain his teleportation a little bit." At this moment, Leo heard their whispers, and then murmured in a low voice, "You guys are talking too loudly." It has been strengthened to 10 times, so in just a blink of an eye, Leo rushed to a few people who were hiding in the bushes 100 meters away from him. "Ah!" Seeing Leo who suddenly appeared, Katie screamed, subconsciously used her ability, and hid in the soil, but when Pyro saw Leo appearing, he ignited the lighter and controlled a ball of feet. A fireball the size of a truck was thrown towards Leo. "It's too slow," Leo murmured. Leo avoided the fireball just by rubbing his feet, and then rushed towards Bobby, who was still in surprise. Seeing this, Scott slightly adjusted the glasses on his face. Immediately, a beam of red light shot towards Leo. Bang! The surge of thoughts turned into a shield in front of the beam of light. Although it was only blocked for less than 2 seconds, Leo had already grabbed Bobby by this time, but he was just catching Bobby. At that moment, Katie emerged from the soil, stuck out her tongue at Leo, grabbed Bobby, and took Bobby to hide in the soil. Naughty. Leo raised his eyebrows, avoiding Colossus's fist. His thoughts turned into ropes, and directly tied up John, who was still about to set fire, and then looked at Scott, who was still about to shoot laser rays. Watching Scott's glasses, he teleported, and the next moment, the glasses directly appeared on Leo's face. Seeing this, Scott, who couldn't control his ability, squeezed his eyes in a hurry. The two of you are game over. Do you three still want to continue? Leo said with a smile. The next moment, I saw Katie pulling Bobby up from the soil, and then sprayed a large amount of ice chips from Bobby's hands, spraying towards Leo with extremely cold temperature. This ability is good, it's very similar to my lightning. Leo whispered in his heart, and a wave of thoughts appeared, and swept towards Bobby's feet, directly sweeping Bobby's face to the sky. Seeing this, Bobby hurriedly put away his ability and planned to use Katie's ability to hide again. Seeing this, Leo directly controlled his mind power to form an invisible cage, put the two of them in it, and then faced the steel man rushing towards him. He smiled and said, "Do you still want to continue?" Seeing this, the steel man touched the bright head, with a smile on his face, and released his ability. After cancelling the simulated environment, Leo smiled at the four teenagers who looked unwilling and Scott who looked helpless. "You're so stupid." "It's because you are too capable," Katie said in a low voice. Hearing this, Leo raised his eyebrows and said, "My strongest ability is useless." Hearing Leo's words, the four teenagers were instantly dumbfounded. Katie was the first to discover me, but she was too timid, but John was the one who attacked me first, Leo said. Hearing Leo's words, Katie blushed, but Burning Man's face showed a look of pride. Then Leo continued, "Bobby is very capable, but his reaction is too slow, and Peter's speed is too slow. Well, Scott, I won't say anything about you, the weakness is too obvious." Looking at the thoughtful faces, Leo smiled and said, "Do you want to do it again?" "Yes," the four responded in unison, and Scott smiled wryly upon hearing this. As time passed, the four teenagers became more and more comfortable using their abilities, but they discovered a more terrifying thing, that is, the time for Leo to knock them down became shorter and shorter, and so far, Leo hasn't used his strongest ability yet, he just used his mind and teleportation. "I'm exhausted." As the simulated scene disappeared, Katie sat down on the ground with a bang, and the other three also looked exhausted. "Ah, my body just got hot," Leo whispered, pointing to the four people sitting slumped on the ground, and said to Scott, "I'll go out first, and they will leave it to you." The young man walked out with resentful and admiring eyes. As soon as Leo went out and walked a few steps, he saw Aurora and Chin with ugly faces, as if they had eaten their stomachs, and asked curiously, "Why are your faces so ugly?" "Stop talking. We went shopping and met a pervert. He kept harassing us like brown sugar." Aurora looked angry. "Pervert? Which pervert dares to provoke you?" Leo was a little curious. Hearing this, Aurora rolled his eyes and said, "That pervert can teleport, and after being attacked by me, his injuries recovered quickly." "Mutant?" Leo asked curiously. "Probably, but because he's wearing a red mask, I can't see his face." Jin added, "It's a pervert. A big man wearing a red and black tights. The most important thing is that he is a chatterbox." "Oh no, that's not talking at all. I doubt it now. It's his mutant ability. Crazy." Thinking of that pervert who couldn't stop talking, Aurora looked crazy. Chin had a face of approval, and then said, "By the way, he said he is called Deadpool." Deadpool. Hearing Chin's words, Leo couldn't help being shocked. You must know that Deadpool had his head cut off by Logan at that time. How could there be another Deadpool now? Leo felt the need to make sure. Where is the Deadpool? You don't want to find that pervert, do you? This is not a good idea. Hearing Leo's words, Jean said. Hearing this, Leo raised his mouth and nodded. In Manhattan, on the top floor of an office building. After knowing the place where Deadpool appeared last from the piano mouth, Leo teleported over, and after spending some time, he finally saw the person who claimed to be Deadpool on the top of the building when the sun was about to set. Looking at the man sitting on the roof with two knives on his back and hanging his legs outside the building, looking intently at the sunset, Leo tentatively called, "Deadpool." Shish. Maybe it was Leo's voice that disturbed him. The man wearing a red hood and a red and black tights who called himself Deadpool turned his head and made a motion to silence Leo, and then said, "Whoever you are, what do you want to say to me? Don't bother me now. Such a beautiful sunset. I really want to have a blast. Do you want to help me?" Originally, after listening to the first half of the sentence, Leo thought it was quite normal, but the next sentence made Leo's head full of black lines. Wait, hey, how do you know Deadpool's name? Could it be that I seen you before? Hearing the name from Leo's mouth, Deadpool asked seriously. Hearing this, the corner of Leo's mouth twitched slightly, confirming his identity, and finally slapped him directly with neonly. Hey, you didn't want to kill the cute me because of love and hatred. Deadpool teleported aside to avoid Leo's attack, holding his face, and said pitifully. Didn't Logan cut off your head at that time? Leo under the black mask looked at Deadpool, who was already dancing the ballet, and asked. Cut off the head, pick it up and put it on. Hearing Deadpool's tone of picking up the candy after dropping it, Leo was speechless for a moment, but Deadpool suddenly teleported to Leo after seeing the silent Leo. Using the red hood, the small white eyes on his head stared at Leo and said, Ah. I remembered you. It was you who cut off my head with Wolf. As soon as the words fell, he teleported away from Leo for the second time, and said tremblingly, You don't want to do this again. I finally know why Stryker sealed your mouth. Leo said helplessly. Ah, is it because my mouth is so attractive? That's right. Are you married to Little Wolf? I remember that you have couple accessories. I'm so jealous. Deadpool pointed at Leo's left hand. The hollowed-out cross rolled on the ground, looking like I'm so jealous, I'm dead. Looking at the crazy Deadpool in front of him, Leo felt that if he talked to him a few more words, he might be infected. Thinking of this, Leo had to leave. As if guessing what Leo was thinking, Deadpool said, Do you want to leave? I want to have fun with you. Let's play a fighting game. The twin knives, dancing with gorgeous knives, teleported directly to Leo's side, and chopped off Leo's head. Seeing Deadpool's movements, Leo's eyes lit up, and instead of using teleportation to leave here directly, he blocked the sharp samurai sword with his mind, intending to fight Deadpool, loosen his muscles and bones, and then his mind surged out. The mental power that has grown to the point where it can hold 100 tons of weight directly controlled Deadpool, and when the red light in Deadpool's eyes was about to shoot out, he took Deadpool and launched a teleportation, and the next moment the two appeared together in the desert. As soon as his figure appeared, Deadpool jumped back, held his chest, and screamed like a girl who met a hooligan. Ah! Where is this? What do you want to do to me? Seeing this, Leo twitched the corners of his mouth, and didn't reply, but controlled his mental power to slap Deadpool directly, and slapped him directly into the desert. I'm going to be flattened. Do you want to eat Deadpool's pizza? Looking at the Deadpool who kept muttering in his mouth, Leo understood the reason for Aurora's madness, because he also felt the same now, and he didn't want to hear a word from that mouth again. Seeing Deadpool continue to perform all kinds of extremely shameful actions in front of him, Leo's face was dark, and he suddenly felt that he was crazy to find this psychopath on a whim. Boom! Looking at Deadpool, who had already buried himself with sand, with only one head exposed, Leo directly used his thoughts to roll up dozens of tons of sand and smash it down on Deadpool. I like sand, but I don't like being buried. Seeing this, Deadpool teleported to Leo's side, and he took the double knives behind his back into his hands again, covering Leo under the light of his knives. But the next moment, the two samurai swords were controlled by Leo, and then became distorted under the control of Leo's thoughts. Don't hurt my baby. I bought it after beheading many people. Seeing Leo's actions, Deadpool rolled on the ground like a child. Ding, ding. With two clear sounds, Leo directly twisted the two knives. Ah, Deadpool is angry. Deadpool screamed, got up from the ground, and slowly stretched out two sharp silver long knives from the back of Deadpool's hands with shining light. The all-conquering Edmund blade sliced through the air, piercing towards Leo's heart with a deadly arc. Seeing this, Leo dodged his body and left Deadpool's attack range, but as soon as he appeared, a red ray had already arrived in front of Leo, and the Deadpool had predicted Leo's location after teleportation. The thought moves with the heart, and the thought power rushes out to block the two rays. The next moment, the two Edmund long knives stab the thought force wall, and then after a strange tremor, the two long knives pierce the thought force wall directly. Continue to stab at Leo. Awesome. Leo gave a deep praise. Looking at the two long knives that were rapidly zooming in, Leo didn't feel nervous at all. Under Leo's control, a burst of electric current flashed across Leo's body, and his speed and strength were greatly enhanced by the electric current. After reflexing his nerves, Leo just turned his body slightly to avoid the two long knives, and then the force of thought gushed out and pushed Deadpool to a distance, and then Deadpool shot a red ray at Leo again. Boom! This time, Leo didn't use his thoughts to block, but stretched out his hands to the ray, and then the silver lightning flashed, like two twisted water snakes, and collided with the red ray. In an instant, the two different energies were entangled together, splashing like two jets of water of different colors. The radiant energy fell on the sand in the desert, and some of the sand began to melt like water. Whoa 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 whoa. You can come too. I can come too. Let's play shooting games together. While maintaining the ray, while uttering pornographic jokes, Deadpool's behavior is always maddening. And Leo took advantage of Deadpool's opportunity to keep the ray immobile, and his mental power directly enveloped Deadpool, entangled his feet and dropped him into the air. Can you let me go? I can't even open my legs in this position. Don't you want to have a good time? Deadpool tried to ask Leo to let him go with a pitiful tone. Hearing this, Leo twitched his mouth and said, "Do you like exciting things?" "Wow, of course, you know." Before Deadpool finished speaking, a silver glow emerged from Leo's body. Following the invisible power of thought, it spread directly to Deadpool's body. Instantly, Deadpool's body trembled, and within a short while, there was a burst of meaty smell. Seeing this, Leo let go of Deadpool directly and threw him into the sand. Deadpool, lying on the sand, with a puff of black smoke coming out of his mouth, said, "Oh. It's so exciting. I really want to have a good time again." Through the scorched red tights that had turned black, Leo saw that Deadpool's injuries were recovering crazily. Leo shook the corners of his mouth a few times, completely losing interest in this resilient and perverted guy, and then his figure disappeared in a flash. Not see. In just a few breaths, Deadpool became alive again, but when he saw that he was the only one left in the dark desert, he let out a miserable howl. "Ah. Little Indian is gone." After a while, Deadpool suddenly let out a cheap laugh. "Hey. I'll go find Shouty Indian." It has been more than half a month since Deadpool was thrown into the desert. In the morning, Leo opened the newspaper that Belle handed over, and smiled at Eddie, who was standing next to the butler Belle after pouring milk for him, and opened the newspaper to read. "This little guy named Spider-Man is very active recently." Leo saw the report about Spider-Man in the newspaper again, and said with a faint smile, "Compared to you, he is indeed a little guy." The butler Belle, one of the three, Emma, Belle and Eddie, who knew the identity of the Black Emperor Leo, agreed with Leo's statement. "Are you saying I'm old?" Looking at Belle, whose hair had turned gray, Leo said dissatisfiedly. Seeing this, Belle smiled and didn't answer, but the old Paul looked at Leo with the glasses he got 3 years ago. After Al glanced at him, he said in his own old voice, "Leo is not old, nothing has changed in the past 10 years. After hearing old Paul's words, Aunt Lynn also added, "Emma too. She is still so beautiful. But old Paul and I are too old to walk." "Uncle Paul, you and Aunt Lynn will live a long life," Leo said, looking at the two old people who were almost 80 years old. "By the way, Leo, Tony invited you to his charity party tonight, and because you have rejected his party invitations 11 times in a row, he said that you must be there today, or he will come to his house and arrest you." Emma wiped the corner of her mouth gracefully, speaking with a smile. "Okay, Belle, you will reply to Tony in a while, saying that I will go." Leo had no choice but to arrange his own butler like this, but he didn't want Leo's cell phone on the dining table to transmit. Tony's voice came out. "Ah, Leo, since you heard my message, it means you agreed to my invitation, so see you at 8 o'clock in the evening." Leo was expressionless, chewed the food in his mouth twice, and said, "He let Jarvis hack into my mobile phone system again." "It seems so, sir." Belle smiled. "Peter has been living a good life recently, but it is easy to get sleepy. Of course, this is worth understanding. After all, he is not only a student now, but now Peter's mind is full of excitement, because he has received an invitation from Gwen to invite him tonight go to his house for dinner." From Gwen's unusual behavior, he knew that Gwen was about to accept him, and he couldn't help secretly laughing when he thought of this. Mr. Parker, who was just laughing at this time, forgot the location, so he was warned by his teacher. Seeing this, Peter put away the excited smile on his face and said, "I'm sorry." In the evening, Peter came to Gwen's house. Although he climbed up from the outside wall, he made up a reasonable excuse to hide from the curious Gwen. Looking at the posters of the Black Emperor posted all over the room, Peter suddenly became jealous of the Black Emperor, and then said in a sour tone, "Gwen, are you a fan of the Black Emperor?" Hearing Peter's words, Gwen blurted out without even thinking, "Of course." Then he said to Peter with an excited expression, our family is all fans of the Black Emperor. Since the Black Emperor saved me 10 years ago, our family has been his staunch supporter. Ah, he saved you. He also saved my Uncle Ben. Hearing Gwen's words, Peter said in surprise. Look, the Black Emperor has helped countless people. He is a great hero. Hearing Peter's words, Gwen looked proud, and then the two seemed to have found a common topic, and they started discussing blah blah blah. Suddenly, Peter asked Gwen with a nervous tone, Gwen, how do you think Spider-Man compares to the Black King? Spider-Man, he is too far behind the Black Emperor. I have seen his video reports on the internet. He is also helping people. It can be seen that he is a kind-hearted person, but my father doesn't like him. Ah, why? Isn't he helping the police like the Black Emperor, arresting bad guys? Hearing this, Gwen gave Peter a strange look, and then said, although he is helping the police, I heard from my father that he always spoils their police affairs. Hearing Gwen's words, Peter was instantly dumbfounded. Don't you realize that Spider-Man is helping the police just like the Black Emperor? Although Gwen knew that his father had a bad opinion of Spider-Man, Peter at the dinner table still tried to help Spider-Man. Defended himself. The Black Emperor won't ruin our business. Last time, Spider-Man easily caught a car thief, but did he know? We have been following that thief for a long time, and tried to use him to catch the car thief behind him. The gang of thieves has been wiped out in one go, now it's all right, the clues are broken. Speaking of Spider-Man, Sheriff Stacy's face was full of anger. But, after all, he wants to help. We don't need his help. But, Peter, I have something to tell you. Seeing the two people on the table who were about to quarrel, Gwen interrupted Peter and motioned him to go out with her. After all, she didn't come here for Spider-Man. It made Peter fight with his father. Following Gwen to the balcony outside, Peter felt a little uneasy, and then said, Gwen, I'm sorry. It's okay. Gwen smiled faintly. Looking at Gwen, Peter finally made up his mind to reveal his identity, then walked up to Gwen, and said, I have something to tell you. Just as Peter and Gwen showed their identities, Leo got into the car driven by the butler Belle and was on his way to Tony's charity party. Belle, do you think I should have a good chat with Tony tonight about the fact that he has been invading all the electrical appliances in our house? Leo asked indifferently, looking at the pedestrians outside the window boredly. Belle looked at the road conditions intently, and when he heard Leo's words, he couldn't help complaining, as you like, sir. But are you sure it's just for chat? You won't give him a pair of black eye sockets like last time? Yeah, why don't I remember? Leo thought for a moment and said, at this moment, Belle stepped on the brakes, because the Williamsburg Bridge they were going to pass was crowded with cars. Sir, something seems to be happening ahead. Belle, the butler, turned his head and explained why he stepped on the brakes, only to find that Leo had already put on a black battle suit. I know, Belle, there seems to be a monster with a long tail like a lizard in front. Be careful, I'll go and have a look. Leo disappeared into the car as soon as the words fell. Looking at Leo's figure floating in the air in the distance, Belle murmured, I should make a suggestion, ask Mr. Leo to change the driver, such an exciting thing is still suitable for young people. Teleporting to the top of the monster, seeing the car that was just thrown off the bridge by the monster and falling towards the river, Leo's thoughts surged to control the falling car, and put the car on the bridge gently. The people in the car had already lost their breath, and from the tattered car body, it could even be seen that the man in a suit was almost torn in half by the monster. But when the monster saw Leo's black figure, its animal eyes shrank slightly and recognized Leo's identity. It looked at the glassware it had just found on its paws, and found no place to store it, so it threw it directly into the he said to himself, and then ran wildly on the bridge. In the process of running wildly, in order to attract Leo's attention, the cars blocking his way were thrown off the bridge by him. This monster is intelligent. Leo's sharp eyes observed the expression of the lizard monster just now, and his heart moved. While putting those cars on the bridge again with his thoughts, he teleported in front of the monster, blocking the way of the monster. Black Emperor, don't try to block me. Seeing this, the lizard monster spit out words, made a threatening expression, and then a long tail swept towards Leo with the sound of broken gold and rocks. Sure enough, seeing that the monster recognized his identity, Leo's eyes narrowed. While blocking the tail with his thoughts, he instantly turned into an invisible rope and wrapped around the monster's body along the monster's tail, but he didn't want to, but he directly twisted and abandoned his own tail, then turned his head and fled. While running away, Leo found that the monster's severed tail had grown out again in just a few seconds. What a terrifying recovery ability, Leo murmured, and was about to teleport again, but at this moment, a red ray shot towards him. Deadpool. Looking at the red figure standing on the bridge, Leo shrank his eyes, and in order to prevent ordinary people around him from being injured, he reached out to block the rays. Chuck chuck, little Diane, I found you. Deadpool made a strange sound, took out the gun on his lap and shot a bullet at Leo. Bang! The bullet hit the invisible wall of thought power and burst instantly, but a strange red liquid sprayed out from the explosive bullet, which then turned into a red heart-shaped pattern and stuck to the wall of thought power. Oh, my heart. Shall Indian accept it? Deadpool held his chest and made a motion of throwing his heart. Glancing at the troublesome Deadpool, the corners of Leo's mouth twitched, a ball of lightning gathered in his hand, and he threw it towards Deadpool casually with a groaning sound. Not only did Deadpool see this, he didn't hide, but his face was filled with joy. He opened his arms and embraced the ball-shaped electric light. Ah, exciting. While shaking his whole body, Deadpool let out a contented groan, and hit an innocent car on the bridge with a boom. And the lizard monster took this opportunity to stand on the guardrail of the bridge, and planned to jump into the river to escape. Seeing this, Leo sneered, stretched out his hand to the monster in the distance, and then directly bound the monster with a lot of thought power. He directly grabbed the monster's body in midair, and then, while the monster was struggling, he threw it directly at the body of Deadpool, who had recovered, and his eyes began to glow red. Boom! With a loud noise, Deadpool and the monster directly hit the guardrail of the bridge, deforming the steel guardrail. At the same time, Deadpool and the green-skinned monster fell silent because most of their bones were broken. Less than a second. Hey, I said buddy, you can't put your ugly green ass in my face. I don't like green. Deadpool, who struggled to crawl out from under the monster, waved his hands in distaste. The slowly healing bones stood up, and at the same time, the lizard monster with terrifying recovery ability opened its mouth, spit out a columnar glass vessel filled with green liquid, its eyes gleamed fiercely, and fell to the ground. At this moment, a figure dressed in red and blue tights with a huge spider drawn on the back appeared, shot out a strand of spider silk, stuck to the glass vessel thrown to the ground, pulled it into his hand, and said, "Hey, big monster, didn't your mother tell you not to throw things?" Seeing the exact same figure in the morning newspaper photo, Leo asked, "Spider-Man?" Hearing Leo's figure, Peter, who had just revealed his identity to his girlfriend, rushed over, and said in a tense tone as if he had seen an idol, "Ah. Hello Black Emperor, I am a good neighbor spider from New York Citizen's hero." At this moment, Deadpool, who had fully recovered, looked at Spider-Man and said in a puzzled tone, "Hey. Why do you have the same style of tights as me? Are you imitating me?" Hearing this, Spider-Man was stunned for a moment, and then complained, "Your mother made this dress, right? The craftsmanship is good. Next time I need it, can I place an order directly for you?" "Ha, look at your playful little mouth, let's shoot you." Deadpool smiled disdainfully when he heard that. A red ray shot from his eyes towards Spider-Man, and at the same time, Leo was also enveloped in it. Seeing this, Spider-Man let out a strange cry, and crawled directly on the ground to avoid the rays, but Leo teleported to the lizard monster, and threw a bolt of lightning at the monster. Roar! The monster roared in pain, waving its sharp claws and pounced on Leo, but at this moment, there was a cry from behind Leo. It turned out that the rays shot by Deadpool directly smashed the guardrail. The car parked on the side of the guardrail also fell down the bridge with the impact. Seeing this, the Spider-Man closest to the car shot out a spider web, and relied on the good tenacity of the spider web to lift the car in midair. "Help my child, he's in the car." Looking at the car in midair, the owner of the car shouted anxiously. Hearing this, Leo dodged the sharp claws of the lizard monster, appeared in front of Spider-Man, blocked Deadpool's deadly rays, and said to Spider-Man, "Go and save the children, and leave them to me." Hearing this, Spider-Man glanced at the enemies he couldn't possibly block, nodded, and a spider web shot out and swung down. "You guys are enough." Looking at the lizard monster and the Deadpool who teleported over, Leo shouted angrily, and a flash of lightning appeared in his hand, and then under the control of Leo's thought power, the lightning and thought power combined and turned into a javelin shining with lightning was thrown at the charging monster under the control of mental power. The lightning javelin flashed across the air, without giving the monster any time to react. It directly pierced the monster, and with the roar of the monster, it exploded with a boom, blasting the monster's lower body at the same time, with the remaining upper body of the monster fell under the bridge, splashing a burst of water. When Deadpool saw it, the two knives in his hand paused, his body trembled a few times, and he said with a trembling voice, "So violent. I like it so much. I like you more and more, shouty Indian. It's so annoying." Leo's body flashed with lightning, and his speed soared, and he rushed directly in front of Deadpool. A large amount of lightning surged in his hand. The lightning burst out, and the Deadpool who was shining with lightning was thrown out with his thoughts. "It's so sour. I still want to." Deadpool flying in the air shouted loudly. Leo's face darkened when he heard this, and he controlled his thoughts to tear off the guardrail by the bridge. A section of steel pipe was thrown towards Deadpool who had already flown away. In an instant, the world became quiet. Heaving a sigh of relief, Leo turned his head and saw Spider-Man jumping onto the bridge with a child in his arms. Coincidentally, in order to save the child just now, Spider-Man took off his mask because the mask scared the child, so Leo saw the green face under the mask, and Torio's memory became better and better because of the body's enhanced memory. He instantly remembered the young man who was holding an old man and crying loudly that night. "Thank you." Amidst the voice of thanks from the child's father, Peter quickly put on his mask, looked around with guilt, and happened to see Leo's upturned mouth. Leo walked up to Spider-Man, smiled affirmatively and said, "We have seen it." "That, no." Peter shook his head guiltily. Seeing this, Leo smiled, knowing that the Spider-Man in front of him didn't want to reveal his true identity, and then said, "Good job. Goodbye then." Hearing Leo's words, a kind of ecstasy of being recognized by the hero Black Emperor welled up in his heart, and Peter wanted to tell Gwen immediately, "I was praised by the Black Emperor." Thinking of Gwen, Peter suddenly remembered Gwen's Black Emperor posters all over the room, and then a thought came to him, and he shouted to Leo who had turned around, "Black Emperor. Wait. What's up? Can you sign me?" Peter ran to Leo, pointing to the spider suit on his body, and asked with a hint of expectation. Leo was taken aback for a moment, as if he felt the expectant gaze under the mask. He smiled and said, "Okay. I'm going to find a pen." Hearing Leo's words, Peter was very excited. "No need." Leo stopped the excited Spider-Man. A flash of lightning flashed in his hand, and then under the control of his mind, it turned into a silver electric pen, shining with electric light, and then the electric pen in Leo's hand passing across Spider-Man's chest. A smell of burnt clothes came out, and then Leo's hero name, Black Emperor, appeared on the grid spider suit. Looking at the words on the clothes, Peter hesitated for a moment, and whispered to Leo, "Thank you, Black Emperor. My name is Peter Parker. Thank you for saving my Uncle Ben that day." "Haha, no need." Hearing Peter's words, Leo was stunned for a moment, and then he said, "You are very brave, Peter." Leo disappeared as soon as the words fell. The next moment, Leo appeared in his car. "Sir, Mr. Stark is calling," Belle said while handing the phone to Leo. "Leo, you're on the Williamsburg Bridge. Are you okay?" Tony's anxious voice came out as soon as the phone was connected. Hearing Tony accurately call out his location, Leo was moved and said with a dark face, "I'm fine. But did you let Jarvis follow me again?" "Haha, don't I care about you? Is the traffic over there still stuck? If you want me to say, just use your ability to come here," Tony said awkwardly. "You must have called me over this time. Is there something wrong?" Leo raised his eyebrows and asked guessingly. "That, you'll know when you come here." Tony played a charade and hung up the phone. "Then you can speak now." Just as Tony hung up the phone, he heard Leo's voice from behind him. He froze with a smile on his face, turned around, and said to Leo who was standing behind him, "Come here so soon." That. Looking at the hesitant Tony, Leo rarely saw Tony talking like this, and then asked with a trace of worry, "What's the matter? Are you in any trouble?" "What kind of trouble can the great Stark encounter? It's just that someone wants to hire us as a weapon consultant." Tony raised his eyebrows, and finally stated his purpose for letting Leo come. "Weapon advisor?" Leo asked. and when he was wondering, two figures, a man and a woman, pushed open the door and walked in. "Hello, Mr. Leo." Seeing the man stretching out his hand, Leo froze for a moment, shook his hand, and then asked suspiciously, "Have we met?" Hearing this, the man with the back hairline smiled kindly, "Phil Coulson. I met you 10 years ago." Phil and Natasha, these are the names of the two people who came to find Leo and Tony this time, and Leo got to know Tony after seeing Natasha's charming face and hot body with bumps. The flirtatious Leo finally understood why Tony would listen to a strange man chattering in front of him this time, and he insisted on letting him come. "We are here this time to represent the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau, and we sincerely invite you two to serve as our weapons consultants." Agent Phil smiled kindly, showing sincerity. Tony stared at the beautiful scenery on Natasha's chest, and said indifferently, "This name is too long, you should suggest it to your relevant leaders." Because of the EO group, Leo has also heard about this organization and understands that it is an organization with great energy. Without thinking about it, he refused directly, "Sorry. I'm not interested." Hearing Leo's words, Natasha gave Leo a charming smile and persuaded, "Mr. Leo, please think about it carefully. There are many benefits. Hey, beauty, don't try to seduce Leo, he already has Emma. Come and seduce me." "Tony," Leo yelled speechlessly, stood up, and said to Phil and Natasha, "Nice to meet you, but I have no interest in joining you." "So is Mr. Leo's other identity interested in joining us?" "Another identity." Hearing what Phil said, Tony looked at Leo. Giving Tony a look that will explain to you later, looking at Agent Phil, Leo said angrily, "Are you investigating me? As for your other identity, we have to pay attention, after all, that hero identity has too much influence. Please forgive me." Agent Phil apologized, then glanced at Natasha, and saw that Natasha treated him after nodding his head, in order not to be deducted his meager salary by their black-faced and darker director. Agent Phil hurriedly said, "Since Mr. Leo is not interested in joining us, are you interested in using your reach to cooperative relationship with another identity?" Hearing this, Leo paused for a moment, with a thoughtful look on his face, and after seeing the expression on Leo's face, Phil was afraid that Leo would refuse, and continued, "Of course, we didn't force you to help us. Power is just to establish a mutually beneficial relationship with you, and we must be of some help to you." Then Phil added in his heart, "With your character of repaying your kindness, once we help you, will you still be afraid that you won't help when we have something to do?" Finally, after thinking about it for a while, Leo nodded slowly, and then said, "I can promise you, but you need to keep my other identity secret, and you must not let more people know. This is for sure, please rest assured." Agent Phil, who had achieved his goal and finally did not have to deduct his wages, let out a long breath and assured him. As soon as Agent Phil's words fell, Leo said bluntly, "In this case, please do me a favor now, help me find the next person's trace." Knowing that this is the first step in establishing a cooperative relationship between the two parties, Phil asked carefully, "Who?" "My friend, Logan, a mutant with the ability to heal quickly, nicknamed Wolverine." "Okay, we will let you know as soon as we have news." Phil nodded and took down Leo's words. Seeing that Phil has reached a cooperative relationship with Leo, Natasha had a captivating smile on her face, and asked Tony, "So, Mr. Stark, what about you?" Hearing this, Tony glanced at Natasha, a tangled look flashed across his face, and finally shook his head, and made a lame excuse and said, "Leo didn't join you, and I won't join you, your names it's too long, so it will be a waste of time when I introduce myself in the future." Hearing Tony's words, Natasha, who was already prepared in her heart, twitched the corner of her mouth, pulled down her collar slightly, and continued, "So, what about the partnership?" "Then let's have a partnership." Hearing this, Natasha showed a satisfied smile on her face. Leo was speechless, knowing that he cooperated with them in order to find the trace of Logan, but Tony did it for. "Now that we have established a cooperative relationship, would the beautiful Miss Natasha be willing to spend a crazy night with me?" Tony narrowed his eyes. "Heck, let's see how you behave in the future." Natasha smiled charmingly. Seeing that the purpose of this trip has been achieved, Agent Phil smiled slightly, stood up from the sofa, and said politely, "In this case, we will not disturb the two parties' interest in attending the party." Then she took the lead and walked out, and after showing a provocative smile at Tony, Natasha followed closely with her swaying waist. As soon as the two of them went out, Tony stared straight at Leo without blinking his eyelids. Seeing this, Leo could only say, "Okay. I'll tell you about my other identity." Ao told Tony about his identity as the Black Emperor. Unexpectedly, Tony's first sentence was, "What? You are the Black Emperor who grabbed the headlines as soon as you appeared and made me only occupy the second page of the newspaper. I warn you, don't grab the headlines with me in the future." Looking at Tony, who was staring at him and sternly warning him not to steal his headlines, Leo felt warm in his heart. He knew that Tony was expressing in his own way that he didn't care about Leo's concealment. With Tony's proud character, there are definitely not many people who let Tony do this. "Leo." At this moment Tony called Leo, and when Leo looked at him, Tony said leisurely with a melancholy expression, "For so many years, I thought I was your best friend. I never thought that for that Logan, you would be willing to cooperate with others." Seeing Tony in such a state, Leo, who knew his character well, curled his lips and said nonchalantly, "Tell me. What do you want me to do again?" "Ha ha. Well, lend me your black battle suit for a few days." Hearing this, Tony smiled while hugging Leo's shoulder. Leo saw through Tony's intentions at a glance, raised his eyebrows, and said, "You want to catch girls?" "Ha ha, there's no way. That hot girl was a fan of the Black Emperor last time, so don't even think about it. I don't want my starry night to be covered with strange things the next day." Without any hesitation, Leo directly refused. "Hey, you're so stingy," Tony complained in a low voice, dragged Leo to open the door, and stepped into the noisy party. While Leo and Tony were arguing about the starry night, Peter was shocked at this time, because after he opened his backpack and took out his spoils, the glassware that the lizard monster was about to break, he found a sign on that glassware, the sign of Osborne Enterprises. Then he thought of Professor Connors, who had been studying lizard genes after being reborn in limbs. The lizard man is Professor Connors. Thinking of this, Peter couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat from his conjecture. New York, as an international metropolis, has convenient transportation for everyone to travel in all directions, but what is more developed than that is the water supply and sewage treatment system that is connected to every household, that is, the sewer. At this time, in the dark and damp sewer, a middle-aged blonde man with an elegant face was missing an arm and sat quietly in front of a computer with his head down, but in the next moment, a pair of green eyes following the man's slowly raised head, his eyes were reflected on the computer screen in front of the man, and then the refined look on the man's face was slowly replaced by madness. If Peter was here, he would have cried out in surprise when he saw this man, because this man was Dr. Connors, the man whom Peter suspected to be a lizard man. "Ha ha, this is really a perfect evolution. The frail human body should have been abandoned long ago." Dr. Connors stood up and looked at his regrown lower body with a fascinated look on his face. Apparently because of the regeneration potion, the lower body that was smashed by Leo on the Williamsburg Bridge had grown back in the lizardman state. "I want to lead mankind to evolve." Dr. Connors yelled at the DV machine in front of him recording the experiment, but then he seemed to remember something, and murmured, "If you want to help mankind evolve, then you need to solve the problem that hinders evolution. Obstacles, Black Emperor, Spider-Man." After being silent for a while, Dr. Connors curled up a cold arc, and said to himself, "Since I am not the opponent of the Black Emperor, then I need to find some helpers. Ha ha, be happy. You will be my opponent. The first selected lucky ones to escape from the frail body of human beings." As soon as the words fell, Connors picked up the needle filled with regenerative medicine on the table, and stabbed it fiercely at his broken arm. The next moment, the green lizard man appeared again, and then with a crazy expression on his face's eyes, picked up the rucksack full of regenerative potions on the table, and rushed towards the water supply system. Because of fighting the lizard man and Deadpool with the Black King on the Williamsburg Bridge, the evaluation of Spider-Man has improved a lot in the past 2 days, and even the scene where the Black King signed Spider-Man in the end was still praised by people. It was captured, and while it was on the headlines the next day, it also led to more people knowing about Spider-Man. And Gwen also, because of the Black Emperor's signature clothes sent by Peter. The relationship between the two became more and more sweet, to the point of showing affection all the time, and tortured countless single dogs to death. Although Peter had a very happy life because of Gwen's relationship, but apart from being happy, Peter was always worried that Dr. Connors was missing. Thinking of the last battle, the lizard man, the scene where the lower body exploded under the attack of the Black Emperor, while Peter was worried about the safety of Dr. Connors, he couldn't help but pray that his guess that Dr. Connors was a lizard man was wrong, but the facts are often not what people want. Just when Peter opened the door of the classroom to prepare for class, there were bursts of screams behind him. When he turned his head, a scene of horror appeared in front of his eyes. Two of his classmates screamed in pain on the ground, and then in just a few breaths, it turned into a lizard man exactly like the monster on the Williamsburg Bridge. Although I don't know why the size is much smaller than the last lizard man, but the terrifying appearance and that monster a strong body is still a huge threat to all ordinary people. How come? Peter murmured, looking at the chaotic classroom corridor. He was stunned for a moment, but the next second after seeing the lizard man who rushed towards the crowd, Peter woke up instantly, and then took advantage of everyone's silence while paying attention. After taking off his coat in a corner, Spider-Man appeared. Two spider threads shot out and entangled the legs of the two lizard men. Peter pulled hard, and at the same time, one jumped up and stepped on one of the lizard men, because Peter knew that the lizard man was transformed by his classmates. The relationship between the lizard man and the other lizard man who was still awake jumped directly onto the shoulder of the other lizard man who was still awake. A ball of spider silk shot out, blocking the sight of the lizard man under his feet. While holding the head of the lizard man between his feet, he threw it out fiercely, and then the spider silk continued to shoot out, using the spider silk to turn the two lizard men who had passed out into white rice dumplings. Why are they so weak? Peter, who had seen the power of the lizard men on the bridge, was a little puzzled, but at this moment he didn't have more time to think, because one lizard man after another appeared in his vision. Seeing this, Peter rushed over quickly in fear. At this moment, when Leo was teaching Eddie about magic runes at home, Agent Phil called in, "Mr. Leo, where are you? Now there are a lot of people in Manhattan, like lizard-like monsters. We have sent a large number of personnel to maintain order, but now we need your help." Lizard man. Yes, Mr. Leo, it's the same as the lizard men on the Williamsburg Bridge last time, but this time we saw the appearance of those lizard men. They were changed by ordinary people. Hearing Agent Phil's words, Leo was stunned for a moment, then his figure flashed and disappeared in front of Eddie, and the next moment he appeared in the sky of Manhattan, looking at the chaotic crowd at his feet. Leo frowned, because there were too many lizard men below. Seeing this, Leo thought for a while, dialed Tony's phone with the communicator he carried, and said directly, "Tony, I need Jarvis' help." Hearing the urgency in Leo's words, Tony didn't hesitate, and said, "Okay, I authorize it." As soon as Tony finished speaking, Jarvis' metallic voice rang through Leo's communicator. "Hello. Sir, I'm Jarvis. Jarvis, help me monitor the entire Manhattan area, and report to me the place with the most lizard men." Hearing Leo's order, only a few seconds later, Jarvis' voice sounded, "Middle of 5th Avenue. Sir." As soon as Jarvis finished speaking, Leo's figure appeared in the place Jarvis described in a flash. As soon as he appeared, a lizard man waved his claws and rushed towards him. Seeing this, Leo had a thought, using his mind to directly control the claw-waving lizard men and throw them away. Thinking that these lizard men were transformed from ordinary people, Leo didn't use his power control ability to deal with him, but just used his mind to control the scattered steel bars on the road. It turned into a steel rope and bound the lizard man. Then Leo's figure kept flashing on the street, and all the things that could be used for binding were used by Leo. A few minutes later, all the lizard men on the entire street, which had hundreds of them, were controlled by Leo. Stand up. Jarvis. Next location. In this way, with the help of Jarvis, Leo continued to clean up the lizard men one by one. Half an hour later, Leo appeared in the campus of a high school and saw the lizard men surrounded Spider-Man. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.